בחרמון נמס השלג בחצי הלילה, בחרמון זורם לו פלג בחצי הליל. אבא שם על הר השלג בחצי הלילה, שר שירים על נס בפלא עם כל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. בבקעת תמר פורח בחצי הלילה, הירח שם זורח בחצי הליל. שם אחי ודאי שומע בחצי הלילה את שירנו השמח כאן בישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. במדבר הולך החושך בחצי הלילה, שקט הס בארץ גושן בחצי הליל. לדודי עיני נחושת בחצי הלילה, וגם הוא חוגג כמו שכל בית ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. ואני יושב בבית בחצי הלילה, עם נרות וגביע יין בחצי הליל, וכוכב מאיר עיניים בחצי הלילה, לי מוסר ברכת שמיים ולכל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. שוב צוהל.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 977 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again, as today we get very big news that Iran's preparing a new attack on Israel, and also Russia is attempting to seize Georgia after the elections have ended. And it's good to see you all once again.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from the war in Ukraine and news from the Middle East as well, as we have largely been able to see that today, luckily, for a at least brief break, the situation in East Asia appears to have at least steadied out for the moment. While tensions are very high, nothing is actively developing at the moment. So all of our news today will be focused entirely on the Middle East and inside of Ukraine, and especially inside of Ukraine today, as we were able to get major news from pretty much the entirety of the front, not only on the Ukrainian front lines, but also deep inside the Russian Federation as well, as we've been able to hear that today major airstrikes have been conducted by Ukrainian armed forces using deep strike drones, hitting a Russian pumping station within the area around Tambov, and also knocking out a Russian distillery within Voronezh. Millions will go sober. Nevertheless, we were also able to hear of a supposed rumor of an invasion into the Bryansk oblast, and at this moment, considering the recency of the information, this information may actually be 100% verified and true. Although we do not have video and picture evidence at the moment to be able to corroborate the claim, we are hearing that apparently the Russians have even backed up the statement, but however have added a caveat to the Ukrainian forces have already been pushed back across the border from their incursion into Bryansk. We're not entirely sure which claim is true, but there is some sort of an incursion currently happening in Bryansk at the moment. Meanwhile, inside of the area of the Kursk battlefield, we have been able to see that Ukrainian forces have continued on their valiant and heroic efforts to continue to defend the areas that they currently have under Ukrainian control. Meanwhile, in the Vovchansk area and all the way down to the direction of Pokrovsk, heavy defensive battles have been waged by Ukrainian forces to stop the Russian Federation from continuing any advances anywhere whatsoever. But before we get into all of this tonight, because we certainly have also, by the way, I completely forgot, we have Middle Eastern news as well. We are hearing that both sides are stating that there will be strikes coming from the Islamic Republic of Iran, most likely within the next week. So we are still going to be on high alert here on this channel, waiting for that incident to happen at any given moment. We can also see that the Israelis are still conducting actions inside of southern Lebanon. And not only that, we are also getting news from inside of Georgia that the president of Georgia themselves has declared that the election was fraudulent, and it appears that Georgia is most likely on the cusp of some sort of a civil war or possibly Russian military intervention in support of the pro-Russian Georgian Dream Party that supposedly won the election in a landslide. There is a lot of news that has just happened in Eastern Europe today, but before we get into all of this and cover the massive amount of news that we have tonight, I do want to make sure that I let everyone know two major things. One, we do have a Sunday night fundraiser running tonight, which is for Nova Ukraine.
Hey, it's fundraiser time, baby. Let's go.
And we have a goal of $3,000, and we've nearly hit $400 on the fundraiser so far. So if you want to see the Lee Spring Army never miss a goal, because we have never missed one up till this point, help us to get over the top and send thousands of dollars to support Nova Ukraine and the amazing operations they have been conducting in support of the Ukrainian citizenry, and not only that, the Ukrainian soldiers as well. We also have another major piece of news that we want to make sure to get out of the way at the very beginning, because we want so many people to hear about this amazing feat. For the first time ever, the Lee Spring Army is officially inside of Ukraine. That is something that we are able to proudly declare today, as BC Skyman has undergone an amazing expeditionary mission for the entirety of the Lee Spring Army, along with his friend Yuri, to help out the Ukrainian armed forces directly. The first time this channel has ever been able to directly support the Ukrainian armed forces outside of a kind of a third-party nonprofit like we're fundraising for tonight, and it was absolutely incredible. We do not have the video at the moment. I believe BC Skyman and Matthew are still trying to troubleshoot how to get the video onto the stream to show all of y'all, but we were able to get amazing pictures of the Lee Spring Army flag in Ukraine, being signed by Ukrainian soldiers, mind you, along with all of the Leukomed bandages that we also sent as well with the flag. It was absolutely incredible, and I'm going to be popping up our Discord right here to show you all the pictures that we have of this, because I feel like the entirety of the Lee Spring Army can certainly be proud, without a doubt, of the amazing accomplishments that were conducted not only by many members of the Lee Spring Army that provided these bandages, but especially BC Skyman and Yuri, who were the ones that made this entire operation possible, and sending these bandages along with one of our white and gold banners all the way over to Ukraine. In our first picture here, sadly Matthew can't follow along with us because he can't see the screen share of the Discord, but in the first picture here, we can see the LSA flag right there being signed by soldiers of the Ukrainian armed forces. And it is...
Hey, look at that. I love to see it, man. The LSA flag back on the battlefield once again. That's so cool to see the soldiers signing it. And it's also cool to see they got the bandages like that. Once again, real quick, Enforcer, I just want to say, huge shout out to Yuri and BC Skyman, because BC organized that and completely on his own with Yuri, and with the help of you and the audience, they were able to deliver a ton of those bandages over there to Ukraine. That really is like a very laudable thing to do, and huge shout out to BC. I don't think he's here tonight, but whenever he does hear this, like, huge shout out to him, and also Yuri for actually making this happen.
And I would have to agree. It is amazing to see that BC Skyman and Yuri made it happen and made this entire thing a reality for the whole of the Lee Spring Army, which is an absolutely amazing thing. But to show y'all this, also, one thing I also want to show y'all as well is that this is an official sanctioned enforcer flag. There's only been one batch that has ever been put out of the LSA white and gold standard that everyone knows at this point, and this one does have the official enforcer autograph at the bottom right corner, which is my autograph. So that is actually one of the flags from our initial batch that actually did get sent all the way over to Ukraine. This thing is physically in Ukraine right now. It is the first LSA flag in Ukraine. It is the first time that the LSA has ever directly supported the armed forces of Ukraine, and it's the first time that we've ever done something outside of YouTube Giving, which is a fundraising system that we're using right now, to be able to support Ukraine, and it was a success. Moving y'all into the next picture, we can see even more soldiers signing the flag right here. We can also see another soldier watching on as the flag is signed along the wall. We can see all of their combat gear laid out, jackets, such things, food stores, stuff like that. And we can also see right here the flag laying on a table, and we can see all of the Lukamed bandages in the background sitting inside of the bags that they were delivered in. I believe, if I remember correctly, there was more than 1,000 or somewhere close to 1,000 Lukamed bandages that were provided in this single instance, which is a huge number. One Lukamed bandage will most likely save the life of a single Ukrainian soldier if it was to be used. This means that the Elite Spring Army alone in this only the single thing that has made it into Ukraine, we are possibly going to be saving the lives of 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers that may have ended up getting injured at some point in the future that will require a Lukamed bandage like this. These are actually some fairly expensive bandages as far as they go, and it was amazing to see that so many people came together on this channel to be able to get these and send them over to Ukraine. We packed the flag. I also sent in, I believe Matthew and me combined, I think we sent in about 300 total of these bandages. I think Matthew sent in 100, or he sent in 50, and yes. I think I sent in like 150 or 200. I have to go back and look at the receipt on Amazon, but it was still a good amount of them, and it's just so cool to see they're actually in Ukraine with the flag. I mean, the flag represents the entirety of the Elite Spring Army. Every single one of y'all that watch this channel, this flag represents all of our combined efforts, everything that we have largely talked about and stood for on this channel for 3 years now, represented on a single piece of cloth that was shipped all the way over to Ukraine. And we can even see the soldiers right there holding up the flag, thumbs up, and peace signs, which is just wonderful to see. And I love to know that the Elite Spring Army was finally actually able to do something where it was physically represented inside of Ukraine. I've got to tell y'all, it is amazing to see something like this. It's even more amazing to think that this was done by so many people here on this channel that call themselves members of the LSA. So many channels have done many different things, but this channel has never been able to directly support Ukrainian soldiers like this before. And it is just so cool to see that finally, for the first time ever, we were able to do it. And it's just wonderful to see. It wouldn't have been possible without every single one of y'all along every single step of the way. BC Skyman would have never found this channel if it wasn't for everyone who had joined in the first place. He was one of the old guards who joined on the 4th day of the war when the channel blew up. We wouldn't have been able to have enough people to send Lukamed bandages to have such a large number, to have such an impact. We would have never had a community to actually create a coherent, cohesive message like this, and to be able to create our entirely own community from the ground up out of the LSA. We would have never been able to have done any of that, and all of that came together to make this one moment possible. And of course, we cannot put enough thanks and enough commendations on BC, Skyman, and Yuri, both amazing members of the LSA who were really the crux of this entire thing and made this entire delivery possible. If it wasn't for them, none of this would have happened. And so I really do want y'all, because I've seen some people saying, you know, congrats to Matthew and me. I don't really want y'all giving congratulations to Matthew and me. I want y'all giving congratulations to BC, Skyman, and Yuri, because if it was not for them, none of this would have ever been possible. And they are truly what makes the LSA an amazing and special organization, is folks like them. They are upstanding members and amazing members of the Elite Spring Army, and the kind of efforts that they're doing, helping out in Ukraine and helping this community to have a way for the first time ever to do this, is truly incredible. So a massive shout out to them.
Huge shout out to them both, by the way. And also, real quick, Enforcer, to answer the question, I'm being inundated by this question. Typically, by the way, we do not cover merch on this night, but to answer this question real fast, people are saying, can I buy an LSA flag? Sadly, no. The answer is no to that right now, but in the future, we will be bringing those back, just not right this second. But that's real quick to answer that question. There's a ton of people are like, where do I get the LSA flag? We did a run on that a long time ago. Actually, I think it was a few months back, and we plan on bringing it back eventually, but it's just not in the store right now.
And we will be getting LSA flags back out there just to show y'all another picture, or another lot of pictures of this thing. We'll show y'all the Ukrainian soldiers holding the flag. We will be trying to get these back out there eventually. It's just that logistically, it actually takes a lot to be able to get the flags out to everyone, especially with the volume of orders there usually are. But we will be having another batch out, guaranteed, during LSA week this upcoming year, which is only a few months away at this point. or we will have another batch out before then. It's just that it takes a little bit of effort to be able to get these out, and it takes a lot of time. And also, I'm kind of debating whether I'm going to autograph every single one of them again or not, considering that our channel has grown almost twice the size it was when we did the last merch run. I don't really know how many people would buy these flags. It may even be twice as many that we sell, but I would like to sign all of them because I would like y'all to know that it isn't just some kind of like a literal endless factory just shooting these things straight out the door as soon as we get them and pack them. We want y'all to know that we actually did physically look at each and every flag and pretty much gave it a stamp of approval that we looked at it, and it's a flag from us to y'all if y'all got one of them. We might have to include that in the cost, though. Maybe ramp up the cost, or maybe make it to where you can pay extra to get the autograph, maybe so that way we can just limit the overall number of flags that are being sent out, so that way it doesn't cause me to have like carpal tunnel syndrome. But we will see, because I would love to get more flags out to everyone, because the last one was crazy. Like, we literally had flags going everywhere. We have flags in Japan, we have flags in Germany, here in America, up in Canada, over in Australia and New Zealand. There are literally LSA flags in every corner of the globe at this point, and even inside of Ukraine itself, which is the craziest part at this point, there's one in Ukraine. So we do want to get more of them out there, and if we can do that a lot sooner than later, we will. Right now, though, just, you know, to be fully transparent, it's not going to be soon, because we are starting a merch run here very soon. We were actually going to announce this probably tomorrow or the next day, but we are going to be putting out a brand new t-shirt inspired off of a t-shirt that Zelensky wore during one of his presidential addresses, and that is going to be our next merch run. We aren't going to plug that tonight at all, though, because it's a Sunday fundraiser night, so all efforts are directed towards the fundraiser instead, but that will be coming around here very soon. But anyways, moving on from that, and all of the big announcements that we have for the Lee Spring Army and all of the amazing work that has been done, and a huge congratulations once again to BC Skemin and Yuri. When they watch this stream, I want them to know that they were the folks who made this possible, and everyone in the Lee Spring Army owes both of y'all a massive thanks, because y'all were the folks who coordinated that entire operation and made it a reality. Matthew and me, of course, supported some bandages to the cause, but y'all were the ones who made this thing entirely possible, and y'all are the folks who deserve all of the thanks and appreciation for that massive success that turned into. But moving on from that and on into Ukraine, the strikes that were had last night were quite severe. The Ukrainians did conduct another deep strike into the Russian Federation overnight, and it appears that a pretty significant amount of damage was caused. Inside the Tambov region, a major pumping station as a part of the Transneft Druzhba dispatch station inside the Tambov region was stricken by a Ukrainian drone. From what we understand, the facility is most likely inoperable for the moment. We do not have a damage assessment yet to be able to say whether it's going to be a semi-permanent knockout or whether it's going to be a very short while before this plant is operational again. But it does seem as though the Russian oil infrastructure has taken another pretty significant hit, and most likely will be suffering for quite some time, hopefully so. Meanwhile, we did also get to see outside the Tambov region, and a little bit further down and into the area of Voronezh, that there was another little interesting occurrence that happened down here. Inside the town of you know what, let me see if I can get the Novokopyorsk. There we go. It took me a little bit, but we got it. In the small little town of Novokopyorsk, inside of the Voronezh Oblast, there is a fairly large distillery, actually, very interestingly enough. And I'm going to zoom in down here, and we'll see if we can quickly find this amazing distillery. It is a distillery of legend. This appears to be maybe it right here. Possibly. We're not entirely sure. But nevertheless, there is a distillery of great legend inside of this city, Matthew. Have you ever heard of it before?
I have not.
They say the vodka flows like water out of Novokopyorsk. They even say that the Kopyor River, which the city is named after, is actually made of entirely pure Russian vodka. Nowhere in the world is alcohol found at such a high grade and quality. It is such a high grade and quality that it hit the Russian suburbs like crack hit the American suburbs back in the 80s, completely making sure that everyone was reliant and just needed that sweet Russian vodka, that sweet Russian release from reality. And we all know that that is always going to be vodka. And there is a fairly large distillery in the city that not only feeds the Kopyor River its delicious elixir, but it also feeds the Russian people that delicious, debilitating elixir as well from this city. And from what we understand, millions will sober up because it appears that the Ukrainians slammed a couple of drones into the distillery in this town. We don't know why they went after the distillery. They've actually done this for a second time now. This is the second distillery to be hit in about 2 days, but they have slammed this thing so hard, it pretty much destroyed the entire distillery. So here's one of the first clips showing the Ukrainians continuing to slam this thing with incoming drones. Dude, that explosion wasn't just the sound of the explosion.
Man?
That was the sound of millions of Russians crying out in terror at one time, knowing that Smirnov just got obliterated. Listen to that, dude.
My God, man. One of those like cursed noises from war or something like that. What it sounded like people were screaming in mass, and what was that?
It was the drone blowing up on the distillery. I don't know what that noise was, man. But dude, you know what I was thinking, man, when I heard this the first time? I was thinking of that dumb meme of Obi-Wan Kenobi from the original Star Wars, where he sat down and Luke Skywalker said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "I don't know. I felt a terrible screaming of millions of people and they suddenly went quiet." You know, like that was like this explosion right here too. When all of the Russians, dude, they have like the force inside of Russia, but it's specifically for the condition of the local distilleries. So when it blew up, dude, what you were hearing right there was the combined scream of millions of Russians knowing that their local liquor store will be without vodka tomorrow. They were like, ah! There's something like,
man, someone in the live chat said that was a scream of Medvedev all the way from Moscow being heard in the town. It probably was. That alcoholic was probably screaming that loud when he figured out his vodka plant was on fire and burning to the ground. Vodka burns pretty nicely, by the way. Like, it's really, really nice as a flammable agent right there.
Yeah, it actually burns pretty clean and pretty hot. I mean, like, it's actually pretty crazy. Usually when distilleries go up, they go up. Like, there's no saving them, really. There's no firefighting efforts to be done. You just got to let the thing burn. And I believe that actually happened to a Jack Daniel's distillery just a little bit north from here in Kentucky or Tennessee a little while ago. Don't you remember that, Matthew? It was like millions of liters of alcohol. I think it was even more than that. It was like tens of millions of liters burned in that fire. And then Jack Daniels came out and was like, "It's okay. That was only like 3% of our stores." And everyone went, "Yay!" And I was like, "What?" I was like, "That was only 3%." I was like, what did they have sitting around out there? But beyond that,
don't mess with people's alcohol in general. Like, when it comes to Americans, don't mess with their alcohol. And also with the Russians, definitely don't mess with theirs, because otherwise the people might get crazy and rise up.
Man, you know what, Matthew? I think this may actually be a part of a new Ukrainian strategy. They're going to make the Russians sober up enough to realize how much life sucks and hope that they overthrow the Russian government that way. They're like, "Quick, blow up the distilleries before winter comes, then they'll really know it sucks." Oh my God! Dude, that's a tank!
That's a tank? Well,
Dude,
let's see that again.
Hold up. We got to watch this whole thing again now, knowing that. Oh my God!
Dang, man. It's like a SpaceX Falcon 5.
Dude, they're trying, like, they're trying to match the Starship,
Летит
man.
над спиртзаводом, сейчас будет. Тихо, тихо, стопорни. Блядь, думаю, нахуй в нашу сторону летит,
Oh, they're really freaking out here. They're hearing the drone coming.
Блядь, вот он!
The day of reckoning is nigh.
Блядь, вон он полетел, сейчас взрыв будет. Ебать!
You know what's wild? Like, these guys right here are getting more hyped up and crazy and distraught acting over the vodka plant being hit than their missile factories being hit. Like, it's really crazy.
Dude, I was about to say that. I was literally about to say, dude, they're more hyped up than when, like, ammunition depots get blown up. Because, like, when the ammunition depots get blown up, like, the whole town they're sitting in is, like, falling apart from bombs landing on it. And they'll be like, "Quiet, bled." And then these guys, man, they're like, "Bled." Actually, yeah. It's like, bro, they're going freaking wild. It's like, dude, you know they're seeing that their life is going to be miserable here because they don't even have the sweet release of vodka to at least dampen the blow a little bit. Oh man, did someone say blow?
Also, by the way, let's see here. AF Kaplan said, Enforcer Matt's right. Vodka's been used to pacify the population going back to the Imperial period. I seriously, think you're correct, AF Kaplan. I think they do, not really intoxicate the civilians, because they do that voluntarily, but there's so much vodka consumption in Russia, and the government probably wants that, because the more people are vodka and not not very sober. They really don't realize exactly how bad the living conditions are there, and they don't realize how bad their government is either. So, they probably want the vodka to keep flowing, and that might be why Ukraine's hitting it, to hurt the quality of life and also the morale in the Russian Federation. That could be part of it.
Matthew, you hit on something that's actually deep. Allow me to rabbit hole for just a moment on that, because that is actually something that is 100% true. It's like historically true. So I'll explain. So way back in the day when the Russian Empire was sort of kind of forming out of the Duchy of Muscovy, which is the general principality that created the Russian Empire we'll know today, the Russian Empire at the time, and I believe it was actually Ivan the Terrible who was the one to do this, started to realize that vodka distilleries, or really alcohol distilleries as a whole, but especially vodka, because it was one of the easiest alcohols to produce in the Russian Empire at the time, is a huge moneymaker, a great source of wealth, and not only that, it will easily pacify the population, because if you're able to give them access to incredibly cheap, strong liquors, it largely will make sure that they're alcoholics and generally are too inebriated to even do anything about oppressive rule or crappy living conditions. And so as that started to form as a mindset or an idea in the Russian Tsardom, they decided that the best thing to do was to make sure that every single distillery in the Russian Empire was controlled by the Tsar directly, not by the Russian imperial government, but by the Tsar. And the Tsar would actually hand out distilleries to specific lords, or they're the Russian equivalent of a lord, as an exchange for loyalty, or to ensure that they were rewarded for heroic actions that were conducted in the name of the Tsar. And over time, that was how it was. Every single distillery in Russia was owned by the Tsar, or it was owned by their, I guess you say, higher lords inside of the Russian Empire, and that was how they largely kept control over the public. They would make the liquor really cheap. I mean, it was cheap as it could get, but they would make it in mass, and not only would it make them money, even with it being as cheap as it was, it would actually make sure that the Russian public was a lot easier to control and really a lot easier to oppress. When the Soviet Union came around in 1921, the Russian Civil War began in 1917, but it ended around 1921, 1922. Lenin actually was a believer that alcohol, and it was true, alcohol is used by the Russian government to control the Russian people. And so Lenin actually completely outlawed alcohol overnight once the Soviet Union was actually founded. And for a little while, there was a huge anti-alcohol campaign, and the entirety of the Soviet Union was technically dry, although, of course, many of y'all know how that goes. We tried that here in America, and a lot of people just went around that by bootlegging liquor, and that's exactly what happened inside the Soviet Union. But if you recall it, the punishments were quite severe. Usually it was a very long stint in prison or something along those lines. Nevertheless, when Lenin died and Stalin came into power, Stalin once again realized that to be able to do what he needs and to be able to ensure absolute loyalty to him so that way he never lost grip on power, he needed to be able to make sure that the Soviet public was inebriated enough they'd never really be able to rise up in a coherent way. And so he brought about the vodka distilleries again, and he completely legalized alcohol consumption of any form and variety throughout the entirety of the Soviet Union. And from that point forward, through the remainder of the Soviet Union's history, every single alcohol distillery, of course, was owned by the government, as everything was during Soviet times, and they would make sure to put it out as cheap and as plentiful as possible to keep the Russian public under control. And even in the modern day, that has not really changed. While some of the distilleries in the Russian Federation are privatized, a decent amount of them are still owned by the government, and they still understand the kind of control and grip that allows the Russian government over its people by giving them cheap and inaccessible, pretty much unlimited access, for a better word, to alcohol supplies, and of a very strong variety. And that is actually something
that's why the U.S. government brought in crack cocaine at one point to, sort of do the same thing with our population. I wonder if that conspiracy theory has some truth to it.
Who knows? Because, like, Russia can internally produce vodka. We can't, internally produce crack on it, like an industrial scale. So I'm like, I don't know. Maybe, who knows? But anyways, moving on from that, that is something, at least as far as the Russians are concerned with vodka, is 100% true. It's a historic fact that wasn't even just a thing that we're saying here in the West. It was something that was realized by Vladimir Lenin himself, the creator of the Soviet Union. He actually believed that as well, because it was true. blue and completely prohibited the consumption and production of alcohol for that specific reason. But moving on from that, we do have some additional clips of the distillery getting hit, and these, of course, are quite exciting. Here's the clip.
Летит сейчас. Летит.
This man is living in disbelief.
С той стороны где-то. Вот, да, правильно, повснимаем.
Oh? Is that a second drone?
Не видно
That's a
его.
Cub cadet coming in fast.
Вот он, вижу.
This is Civil Air Patrol coming in. That's a late. It's a longer clip of the first one. Man, rip to that tank, by the way. That thing actually got some flight miles on that thing. And also, we got to see another clip of the distillery on fire from another angle. And boy, is that fire burning violently and hot. Like, that is crazy. Man, that one guy was coming up at the end, man. He was about to pick a fight when he went in the air. He was like, "What have you done to my delicious liquor?" He's like,
Just the old town crier.
oh, man. And I gotta tell you, man, it was a great time to be around in the Voronezh region today. But nevertheless, it does appear that the Ukrainians are making sure that the Russians will weep, and millions must weep. But moving on out of the area of the Voronezh Oblast and a little bit further on over and into Bryansk really quickly, we were also able to hear that there's been a supposed breach in the Bryansk border area today. According to the Russians, the attack was repelled. According to others, there is some sort of a group that's still in the Bryansk Oblast. The picture's unclear. There has been no Ukrainian comments on the situation for the matter. The only thing we've heard are from Russian propagandists, and they're halfway in between. These guys are in Bryansk and they're not leaving, and they got repelled and they're immediately gone at this point. We're not entirely sure which one's true at the moment. We're going to be waiting for some more Ukrainian information and news, but this may be the opening of a new front inside the Russian Federation, a lot like the Kursk front, although I'm kind of doubting that for the point at this point. We'll kind of have to continue to wait and see if that ever will happen or not. Meanwhile, speaking of what's going on in Kursk is having a little bit of an interesting time tonight. And I would have to say, I hope that many people are thinking about the Kursk Oblast, because it seems as though the Russians aren't, and they're really paying for that quite dearly. Let me show y'all. We have seen, this is the best way to describe this, another suicidal push by a Russian MTLB into the face of a Ukrainian T-64. How does this end? Y'all all know the story. I'll show y'all how it ends. Bam! And it's gone. It's just stupid. I don't even know why they did it, but they did. And the MTLB went careening into a ditch as the Ukrainian T-64 just sits there and tries to recollect itself, wondering why the hell did the Russian MTLB try and charge the tank? No one will ever know the answers to these questions. The Russians just keep doing that more and more, and we just keep watching them get blown away time and time again. We also got to see a couple of more Ukrainian forces, at least with the drones, hitting Russians within the area. We can see this Ukrainian drone right here slamming into this nice Russian ATV. Bam, and it's gone. And y'all want to see it again? Well, you can, as they slam into the back of this Lada Niva, and there goes the Lada. And we can see
a lot of trouble.
Man, we can see a Crispin right there, and that's a whole lot of boiler. Whoa, look at that spoiler. Whoa, look at that trailer. Whoa, look at that oiler. Oh, and this guy, he's seeing it come in, and he didn't really do anything about it. And we can see another FPV drone coming in right here. And another one. And another one. And we can see them hitting some sort of a dish. And we can see this Russian car braking, actually, interesting enough, right before the impact. But nevertheless, that didn't save them. Unfortunate for them. Very fortunate for the Ukrainians. However, moving on from that and into our next bit of news, we also got to see some fairly good successes today. Great success made by the Ukrainians as they actually ended up capturing a Russian T-90S in the area of Kursk today. And here's the clip.
Very happy, блядь. He's very happy.
Батальоном К2 был затрофеен русский танк. Аналогов нет.
They put a massive coke cage on that thing, man. At least the size of a house.
Тепловизорами. рэбом 8-диапазонным, с мангалом, с камерами везде. Все установлено. Дякуємо шановним, нешановним окупантам. Слава Україні!
And Herom Slava. Now you can see the inside of the T90 here.
Not bad, it's relatively clean.
It's relatively clean, Matthew, because this was actually slated to be exported to India before they put it in Kursk.
But it's a shame India couldn't get it. They could have used that.
It's a real shame, Matthew. Not gaining a T90S? A great shame indeed. Heavens. But nevertheless, things do appear to be going pretty okay for the Ukrainians in Sudzha right now. It appears that the Russians are still taking some pretty high losses, at least within the area from what we could tell at the moment, and it seems that the Ukrainian defenses are holding fairly strong. We're not expecting the Ukrainians to be pushed out anytime soon, and so we will be waiting with great anticipation to see that the Ukrainians will be here when we come back on Tuesday and cover this front again. They will be doing quite well by that point, most likely. But moving on from that, and out of this little area, at least within the Kursk Oblast, we are now going to be moving on to a very interesting question about something that has been done as far as the North Koreans. Now, I do have to give you a little bit of a caveat there with this. We have not heard anything out of the Korean Peninsula today, at least, which it kind of is a bit of a fortune, actually, because, you know, of course, not hearing anything is sometimes good. And considering that every time we were hearing something out of the Korean Peninsula, the situation was escalating, we have to assume that it finally leveled off at a very highly tense kind of a environment, but nevertheless hasn't tipped completely over into a border skirmish or a war yet, hopefully. Nevertheless, we are hearing that NATO is planning on making a statement here very soon about the arrival of North Korean troops into the Ukraine war. And a lot of people are putting in their thoughts about this and what NATO's announcement will be and what it will entail specifically by NATO. A lot of people are saying that NATO will issue some harsh words. Some people are saying that they're going to announce intervention, and some people are saying that they're going to do absolutely nothing, and this announcement is going to be something like, your DoorDash is ready, and then we'll be like, oh, okay, well, that was worthless. But nevertheless, Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so we have heard from NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte that NATO is scheduled to make a very big announcement about North Korean troops in Ukraine very soon. And what are your thoughts? What do you think they're going to announce? About 51% said NATO will issue harsh words, while 24% said NATO will announce intervention, and 19% said NATO will do absolutely nothing. And honestly, the status quo for NATO at the moment seems to be only limited to harsh words. There have been people asking for intervention inside of Ukraine to combat the North Korean threat, but I simply don't think NATO is going to take that massive step until much further down the road. So I'm with the 52%. It'll probably be a strongly worded letter or maybe a speech or something like that, warning them to get out, but it'll probably end at that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that in my opinion, I think that NATO is most likely going to be issuing some harsh words. They're going to be saying something like, this is greatly destabilizing the region and continuing to escalate the conflict. We ask that all parties observe that they do not get involved and don't do their stuff. That's probably going to be something like that. And I'm using a mocking tone because that's really stupid. Like, if you're going to make an announcement, it needs to be an announcement of action, not just some lip service, as Monster Lab called it, and that's a very good description right there. It would be annoying to see if that is the case. I'm highly expecting that, though, because one thing that a lot of people love to do is bump their gums. We can see that the United Nations does that incredibly well. And we can also see that other groups do that incredibly well. Sometimes even NATO does that incredibly well. But people need to realize if a major statement's going to be made, it has to have major implications or action put behind it. Because otherwise, the statement is pointless. Because if we sit there and say something like, we don't let the North Koreans be there, we ask that they leave. Like, the North Koreans are going to be like, we ask for you to, like, shut up, punk, and like, that'll be it. It's like, we have to say, they leave, or else there will be consequences. That's the statement.
Someone's going to ask the NATO Secretary General, what should we do, or what should you say to the North Koreans to stop them from sending more troops to Ukraine? And they'll probably say, don't, Jack, just don't. It's like, you know, saying don't is not going to stop anybody. You have to actually back it up with some type of like punishment or deterrence or something, because, you know, NATO is really good at that. They go out and issue the harsh words, the harsh worded letters and things like that. They don't understand that these countries, like the dictatorial regime in Korea and North Korea, that is, They do not care two bits about any of that stuff. Also, what was that?
I am so sorry, man. I was trying to line that up for a meme that we were about to do in a second. Because I was going, oh my god, dude, they're gonna know what it is now. I was waiting for you to finish there, and then I was gonna be like, dude, you know, like when NATO gives their harshly, dang, Dragonus Rex just threw in a $500 donation to the fundraiser. Holy moly!
That
Dude,
is huge.
That's huge. We've gotten up to $2,300 now on the fundraiser. We're getting really close, actually, to $3,000. But nevertheless, Matthew, before that accidentally played, because I was rewinding it because it like played halfway through from the last time we played it in the intro because we were laughing at it and we were talking about how we were going to use it tonight. I was rewinding it and then it accidentally played. But the whole reason was that I was going to say, dude, NATO's going to say, oh, North Korea, don't do it. You need to go home. And then North Korea's response is just going to be, and now it's muted. Oh my god, hang on. And then North Korea's response was just going to be, and that was it. Like, that was going to be the meme.
That could be it.
That could be it, man. Like, the whole joke lost its comedic value, considering I explained it and then it played early and everything. But I still hope that it landed, at least for some, I would hope. But nevertheless, I thank everyone so much for dealing with that technical difficulty. That was not supposed to play at the time it did. It played in the middle of Matthew talking. I was like, dang it. But still, Matthew, I do agree with you. I think that we're probably going to see that NATO probably makes a completely worthless statement that will be useless for the large part.
I would agree with that.
And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And I hope that that doesn't happen again when I rewind this thing. I hope not. Okay, it looks like it didn't. It did. Okay, so hang on 1 second. Let me rewind it all the way. Okay, there we go. We have it ready for when we will need to use that again a little bit later tonight, Matthew. You know what I'm talking about. But anyways, moving on from that, I do also have to say, really quickly, that the fundraiser is doing incredibly good. In the span of just about 40 minutes or so since we've been on air, the fundraiser has gotten to just about $700 short. I think it's actually less than that. I think it's around... no, it is about approximately $700 short. Now it's about $600 or so short of the fundraiser goal. And I would like to wonder, can we hit the $3,000 fundraiser goal in under an hour since the stream has gone live? Can we do that? I wonder if we can. Matthew, do you think we can?
Probably so, man. I would imagine so.
You know? I think we can, Matthew. And like Cole said, Matthew, that was a great joke. Some would say a joke like no other. Never has anyone seen a joke like this. The finest joke. And I gotta admit, it was a great joke, an incredible joke. People have been telling me. People walked into the room and they said, wow, that's an incredible joke. I've never seen a joke like that. And I gotta tell you, no jokes have ever been seen like that before. People are crowding around. We got the biggest crowds here. We got 10,000 people here. They're spanning for miles and miles. They won't show you that on the cameras, but nevertheless, everyone here was like, that was a great joke. And I gotta tell you, there's no joke better, just simply no better. But nevertheless, what do you gotta say, Matthew, about that joke? Is it a good joke? Was it a not good joke? What was it?
Sounds good, man. Sounds good to me.
Man, I'm telling you, it was a great joke and a wonderful joke. But anyways, moving on from that and moving on into our next bit of news to try and get this thing back on course after that little mix-up. We are going to be moving down into the country of Georgia really quickly, because while y'all wouldn't think that Georgia has anything to do with the Ukraine war, and I'd largely think that it probably didn't have anything to do with the Ukraine war either, it looks like it may actually start to get into the same sort of a sphere that the Ukraine war is in at the moment, as we are starting to hear that the election troubles inside of the Republic of Georgia are starting to get worse, and it's not improving at all anytime soon. From what we are understanding, the president of Georgia today has come out and she has stated that she does not recognize the election results inside of the Republic of Georgia. And according to the statement that was made today, the Georgian president did call for protests in front of the parliament building in Tbilisi on Monday. And an opposition rally is scheduled for tomorrow on that avenue in Tbilisi as well. So it does appear that there may be some sort of a violent showdown within the city, the capital of Georgia tomorrow. And it also seems as though the situation is starting to get a little bit more out of hand than we were expecting. To try and explain the situation a little bit of what is going on in Georgia at the moment. Right now, inside of the Republic of Georgia, there are millions of Russian citizens, specifically male citizens, that have fled the Russian Federation because of the war in Ukraine and are currently living inside of Georgia because they really have nowhere else to go. Over the course of this time, we have seen that a pro-Russian backed party called the Georgian Dream has started to rile up a lot of controversy and issues inside of Georgia, largely spiraling the country's political atmosphere or political environment out of control and causing a great deal of issues. Recently, an election was just held around 2 or 3 days ago inside the Republic of Georgia, and the Georgian Dream Party won the vast majority of the votes. According to the final numbers that were published, they won it was approximately, I believe, 56% of the vote, which was a pretty crazy high number, considering that earlier in the day, when the polls had closed, it was only around 40%, and then when they showed the election results again, they had won by about 57%. A lot of people have been pissed, royally pissed about these results, and it appears that no one's buying it. A lot of people inside of the Republic of Georgia are believing that there was some form of election interference that was conducted by the Russian Federation to try and keep some sort of a pro-Russian government in line inside the Republic of Georgia at this moment, but we are still seeing that the tensions are continuing to rise, and it really is starting to beg the question, considering that the Russians have been heavily involved in Georgia since the late 2000s, if the Russian Federation is going to get heavily involved again to try and keep the Republic of Georgia under their thumb. And it seems as though a lot of people are really in between two kinds of concepts. Either the Russians are going to cause chaos, or the Russians are going to attempt a seizing of the country by invading it. Either way, trouble is coming, according to many people. And Matthew, what are folks thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so this poll is relatively fresh. It just got put up like, I think, 30 seconds ago, so it only has about 600 votes on it. But so far, about 45% said Russia will cause some chaos in Georgia, while 45% also said Russia will seize the country of Georgia, and 5% said Russia will back off eventually. And on this one, it's pretty obvious that there was some significant fraud going on in that election. We saw the videos of people stuffing ballot boxes in Georgia, which borders Russia. I'm trying to make that very clear here. We're not talking about the United States Georgia state. We're talking about Georgia, the country, just to make that clear in case YouTube's watching. But we saw a video of people stuffing ballot boxes and also trying to intimidate people and also raiding the opposition party headquarters. That is very indicative that Russia is interfering in their election quite severely on the ground and actively doing things. So I would say it looks like Russia is trying to seize the country in like a hybrid warfare type of election type of means, and that's certainly not good. So I'm actually with the 45%. And now the Georgian president is calling for massive protests, which means that Georgia is about to go into some very tumultuous times in the coming weeks. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the Russian Federation is most likely going to raise chaos or really create hell inside of the Republic of Georgia. I don't believe they'll be conducting an armed invasion, because I do not believe they have the kind of forces required to be able to conduct a successful ground invasion into the Republic of Georgia, because most of those forces are currently tied up in Ukraine, and they are also running out of such large amounts of usable manpower at this point. They're having to call in North Koreans in even larger numbers to try and fill in the manpower gaps they're having in the Kursk oblast at the moment. So in my opinion, I would be saying they're most likely going to be causing a great deal of chaos. They're probably going to expect their thugs inside of the Republic of Georgia to do a lot of the strong arming that the Russian army would do if they had the, I guess, spare manpower to be able to do something like that. But I have a feeling it most likely will just be causing a load of chaos, and probably that would be about it. And when I say that would be about it, that's not really meaning that it's nothing and we're trying to downplay it. It actually would still be a very big deal. The kind of chaos that could be caused could be severe. Many people have to remember that during the Maidan-head revolution of 2014, the pro-Russian separatists at the time were causing a great deal of, I guess you could say, tumult inside of Ukraine, while the other side, the opposition, mostly the pro-EU side, was also causing a great tumult as well. That was generally because of the Ukrainian president at the time saying that they were going to extradite Ukrainian citizens into Russia to pretty much face justice in Russian courts, which a lot of people viewed to be complete bogus. But also, by the way, Matthew, we just hit the goal! Oh,
hey, let's go!
Man,
Igor.
we did
And also, I think it it might have been Hal Rose that took us over the goal. I see a 333 from Anonymous. I don't think that's Anonymous. I think that's Hal Rose. I think YouTube took his name off of it. Probably. That's probably the case because 333 only gets thrown in by one person, and that is the channel legend, Hal Rose. So huge shout out to you, Hal, if that was indeed you, and huge shout out to everybody else as well for helping us to smash the goal because we were given a chance to raise $3,000 for Ukraine, and we just smash the goal. I love to see.
And I have to say, I thank you so much for giving us the chance to help Ukraine in such a meaningful way. We don't really get to help a lot in Ukraine directly, but always through the YouTube Give fundraisers that we run on this channel, which many people have come to adore and enjoy, we are able to make sure to keep supporting Ukraine. I have to thank everyone in the United States of America who have helped to make this possible. I would have to thank all of our European allies as well for helping us to keep this fundraiser rolling and to hit the fundraiser goal, because if it wasn't for every single one of you, we would not be able to make this possible.
And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Someone said French accent. No, that was supposed to be Zelensky. A very bad one at that, because I don't want to destroy my vocal cords tonight trying to do that, like, gravelly voice, like, incredibly well. It's very hard to do that voice at all, because I actually screwed mine up last night, too, trying to do that with Matthew. And then Matthew sounded like a English factory worker from the mid-19th century after that all night long. He was going, and I was like, dude, oh my lord, he's breathing asbestos.
Governor, you come straight out the factory with the coal in the lungs. You walk out and you try to breathe and you can't. You say, "Oh, I'm short of breath. I thought it was the Wuhan Willy bird, but it's not. It's just a coal."
Oi, Governor, you ain't added out rough, have you?
No, I haven't. Where do you work?
I work in the asbestos mines.
Oh my god. Like,
it's my lungs, they've been cut up by the microfibers. They don't absorb oxygen anymore.
man, I was about to say bliad. I was like, that's not an English, man. That's a Russian in
I was
disguise.
about to say blood.
I'm coughing.
Well, I don't think folks, you know what? Did folks who got exposed to a lot of asbestos, did they cough up blood? Because if y'all don't know, folks, the reason why asbestos is dangerous is because the asbestos is an incredibly fine, fibrous sort of a material, and so the fibers can actually break off. Like, if asbestos is tampered with or damaged in any way, these very, very fine fibers will break off, and if you inhale these fibers, they're actually so sharp that when you breathe them in, they actually start to rip the insides of your lung apart, and when your lung tries to heal, it does heal back, but it doesn't heal in a way that can continue to help with the absorption of oxygen in the future. So that actually means...
So what you're saying is asbestos blows the lung out the body like a 9mm.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. But asbestos is pretty nasty. Like crazily enough, man, the highest death rates at one point, I believe in the late 1800s and early 1900s, of people who were working in factories was actually in asbestos mills that were producing textiles out of asbestos. And then after a while, they actually got outdone by the radium girls, who were the women who were working in the radium factories painting stuff with radium. You remember that, Matthew? Like how like everything used to be covered in glow-in-the-dark radium, and everyone would just lick that crap in the factories to make it a little bit easier to put it on?
They would put it on everything. They would have the women out there putting the radium paint on like the dials of clocks and stuff like that. Also, they made like some type of like bowls and plates and stuff like that. Some type of like dishware out of like some radioactive materials. Like, it's crazy. And some people thought like smearing radioactive materials on your face like promoted like longevity in your life. Like some people would do that back in the day, and they didn't end up very well. They ended up with all kinds of horrific things happening to them. But asbestos is certainly not good either. Also, like Andy L said, like breathing glass fibers. Yeah, probably not good for the lungs. But you know, it's kind of like being a Russian. When you're in Russia, you breathe in smoke and fire all day. It's kind of like the same thing. They need like the 1-800 asbestos book number.
If you or a loved one has been wait, hang on, let me do it right. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, you may be entitled to financial compensation. People who have been diagnosed with mesothelioma have worked in shipyards, mills, and dockyards, or whatever they would say in the ad. But beyond that, I hope that does give y'all an interesting rabbit hole about the asbestos thing. It's a very interesting part of history, because asbestos is actually incredible, like with its qualities and like what it can do, at least in actual applications of asbestos, but at the same time, it's incredibly hazardous to health. Like, many of y'all may not know this, it actually used to be called, I believe it was called dragon skin by the Romans, because it was completely flame proof. Like, did you know that, Matthew? Like, asbestos is completely fireproof.
I did know that. That's a part of the reason why they used it so often.
Yeah, and so what was cool, man, is that the Romans would wear the asbestos clothing that they would have, and then if it ever got dirty, they would just put it in a fire. Like, they'd literally just throw it into a fire, and the fire would clean the clothes of anything that was on it.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And also, by the way, I saw Bullseye Bob say, don't forget about uranium glass. That is true. They also made like uranium glass for some cookware as well. The thing, though, with it was if you were simply within close proximity to it for a long time, you would get a large dose of exposure. But generally, though, it wasn't that harmful as long as you stayed, a distance away from it. But the catch was when people would like ingest some of it, if you ingested it, that's where you really got screwed up, because if you ingest uranium, like obviously that's going to be horrific. But if you're simply within proximity of it, it was not horrific unless you stayed around it 24/7, like every single day or something like that. But no, it's crazy like how much stuff used, like radioactive material and like paint and stuff like that. Also, I saw someone elaborate on the radium girls a little bit more. They used the paintbrush and they'd actually lick the paintbrush a little bit, which had the radium on it, and they were actually ingesting the paint with the radium on it, and they lost like the lower part of their jaw after doing that for a long time. Their jaw literally like got cancer or something like that. And the jaw either disintegrated or something like that. It was really, really bad.
And also, I just saw someone say, asbestos is a rock, and that's true. But asbestos, as far as it's like, I think it's just structure as a rock. It's very fibrous. Like, y'all can actually see right here. This is a untampered with asbestos rock that was apparently recovered from, let's see, on the outer Hebrides. Unfortunately, I wouldn't know exactly where that is. It is in Europe. Wait, no, I'm sorry. It's actually in northern Scotland, still in Europe, but I, for some reason, thought it was actually in the Carpathians. But nevertheless, you can actually see the fibrous structure of asbestos in this rock. It almost looks like hair, but that is actually the structure of the rock. If you were to break through it and take a look at it, and that's what makes kind of the particulates of asbestos, and those are what's incredibly dangerous about asbestos. Asbestos, as far as it isn't broken or damaged, and the fibers don't snap, that's actually perfectly fine and safe to be around. But if any of those fibers get old or strained or snap, they release all of these tiny little, pretty much like unseeable knives. The fibers are so small at that point, they're almost completely invisible to the naked eye, and if you breathe those in, that's what starts to cause the massive amounts of lung damage and lung tissue damage from asbestos exposure. So, and actually, it's like asbestos is such an incredibly interesting thing. People just loved asbestos for the longest time until we found out that it was incredibly unsafe and very unhealthy to just even be around at all, and then that's when we saw everyone absolutely throw asbestos away entirely. And you can see all kinds of things that had asbestos. This asbestos cooking glove. This, what the hell is that? A heat spreader for cooking on gas stoves made of asbestos. We can see right here, a gasket covered in asbestos. And we can even see...
It makes you wonder, like, how much more stuff do we not know about that we're currently around every single day that is actually horrific bad for our health? Like, I saw someone in the live chat mention PFAS, like the forever chemicals that are in, like, plastics and things like that with the water bottles and everything. And that probably is one of the next things you're going to say, like, oh my God, that was so bad for humans to, like, drink water out of that. It leached into the water and caused probably a whole bunch of cancers. That's probably what they'll be telling us in the next 10 years, how bad that was that we put those type of chemicals in our drinking water and things like that. I would imagine so, but these people didn't even know how bad this was when they were using it.
Yeah, it was actually starting to get known a little bit around the 1920s, but no one wanted to say anything because they're like, hey, look, like, we don't have anything else that's like a good alternative at this point, so don't bring that up too much. Kind of like how everyone also knew lead paint wasn't necessarily the greatest thing, to have around, but, no one really said anything about it because there wasn't an alternative to lead-based paint yet. So that's kind of something that we know, is that if there isn't an alternative to something, even if it is detrimental to to people's health to use, it most likely will not be talked about too much. Like, for example, like Mandy was saying, the PCB from plastic that leaches into water, You literally cannot get PCB out of water that has been contaminated with PCB. That water is pretty much unusable from that point forward. There's no way in even the water cycle, with it evaporating and then being precipitated back to Earth, that the PCB is unleashed from the water, interestingly enough. So once it's in the water, it cannot go away. So that also means that if there is PCB in the water that you drink as a person, and considering that 70% of the human body is made of water, there is a pretty good chance that you just have PCB just sitting inside of your body all the time, and it will slowly build up over time. Who knows what kind of an impact that has? We still drink a lot of water out of plastic bottles. Like, we're not like someone who doesn't. But, you know, when you think about that, though, it's like, what will they say in like 30 or 40 years? And then you'll be like, oh, damn. Like, you know, like I did that my entire life, and now that is what it is. But still, with that, I hope that does address that kind of, well, that was a very weird rabbit hole for us to go down. But anyways, with that, before we move on into the rest of our Ukraine war news and out of the, really out of Georgia and into the rest of the Ukraine war news that we have tonight, we do want to make sure to get a couple of questions since we've hit the fundraising goal. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, and real quick before we get those questions, let's call off our top donors of the night thus far, because we're currently sitting at $3,043 raised of the $3,000 goal. So we're now officially $43 above the goal. And once again, huge shout out to the LSA for that. And our largest donation of the night went to Draconis Rex 1, who put in that $500 donation.
Dang.
Absolutely massive. And huge shout out to Draconis Rex for that massive donation. Also, huge shout out to Hal Rose, who threw in that $333 donation, as well as Andy L, who threw in a $150, along with Just Chillin', who also threw in a $150. And then we had a $100 from Rad Doctor, as well as some guy called the Enforcer. And then we had a $100 from Patrick Logue, as well as a $100 from Gene Kustra, Hal Rose, and then a $50 from Avari Mendebratis, as well as Greg Carrier, Frostbite Productions, Hobie Gary, as well as Axel K, Snow White, Ken Lane, Mike Smith, and Leora Abigail. And once again, huge shout out to all the top donors tonight and everyone else who's donated to the fundraiser tonight, because of course it's all the donations that add up to get us up to that massive figure. Oh my God, look at that!
Oh
a
my
200
goodness.
from Jared McLaughlin. Huge shout out to Jared as well for the massive donation, massive. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, a massive shout out to everyone who's thrown in support to this fundraiser tonight. Whether the support be big or small, whether we were able to call off y'all's names or not, every single one of y'all have helped to make this fundraiser possible, at the massive accomplishments that the Lee Spring Army achieves every single week. I gotta give y'all a huge thanks for that once again. We cannot overstate how much of a big deal y'all support is to Ukraine, because while it's been going on for 3 years, the support still has a very big impact even 3 years later. And so a massive shout out to each and every one of y'all. And with that, Matthew, what is an interesting question we've seen in the live chat tonight?
All right, and also, by the way, shout out to Iverson Tucker, who just threw in a 50 as well, and brought us to 3,321, and huge shout out to Iverson for that generosity as well. But moving into our first question here, this one's going to go to Mayor of Spin City. That could be a CNN anchor, but anyways, they said, do you think Ukraine will push further into Russia or hold their ground and use it as a bargaining chip?
I think they're going to hold their ground for now. It doesn't look like they are offensively capable of going further into Russia at the moment, and also with the North Koreans arriving, just due to the amount of resistance that they would get trying to move forward, that might make it a lot more difficult. Not that they're like competent soldiers or anything like that, but it still would be difficult to, you know, wipe out 20,000 North Koreans and then push forward. So they might be stuck where they are, and they might just want to hold on to that and then try and trade that later. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one's going to go to Wood Duck, who says, how long do you think it'll be until we have footage of a captured North Korean?
I don't really know. We haven't seen it yet, and the North Koreans, the Ukrainians keep insisting that they're in Kursk, but we haven't seen them capture any of them yet, and we haven't seen any of them get obliterated either, where we can prove that they're North Koreans. So at this point, I don't really know. I would assume probably at least within the next 2 months. Like if I had to give a really big like catchment window to say that the first North Korean will be captured in, at least the next 2 months. But we want to go with a really, really short time frame, maybe within the next month, maybe. And so I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news.
All right, and this one goes to the Anonymous, who says, here in the UK, they say Xi Jinping is unhappy about the North Korean presence in Ukraine, and is it cracks in the axis of evil, maybe?
We don't really know. We haven't really been able to verify any of those reports, and we also want to make it clear, reports like that from sources that say stuff like that, how do they know? Like, that's always a big question to me, is how do they know? I've heard those stories as well. It's just that we don't report on them because it's like, how in the world do we corroborate what a general ally is saying to another ally when they're not publicizing what any of them are saying? And if you usually read those articles, they're always like these very theatrical things like, deep within the buildings of a CCP headquarters inside of Beijing. It's like, how in the world do we know all these details? Like, we don't. Like, that's always the thing that I find interesting about those articles. Like, let me pull up one of them right now. China, North Korea news. Let's see. Here we go. Financial Times. Let's go to this one. Let's just reject that. There we go. So we will go here to this website. We're going to read their article because this is one of them. I've seen this one. China will not like it one bit. Beijing uneasy with North Korean troops in Russia. Even before Kim Jong-un sent troops to support Russia's fight against Ukraine, there were signs that North Korea's main backer, China, was unhappy with his regime's deepening ties with Moscow. In a letter last week seen as signaling Beijing's growing displeasure, they thanked Kim for a congratulatory message on the 75th anniversary, but omitted a traditional reference to North Korea as a friendly neighboring country. It's things like this. It's like, does this really show us that they're unhappy? Because if they were truly unhappy with this, they would be making a public statement about it and trying to just, see that was omitted from a letter. That could just be a clerical issue, maybe. Because, it's not something else like Lukashenko saying, we only got the war with Russia if they start to annex us. Like, that's literally being said outright. So we are able to say the Belarusians are threatening war over a certain kind of a possible future condition. But with this, though, this is literally that 3 words were not mentioned in a letter, so we're assuming that the Chinese are wildly unhappy with them. And that's kind of the thing where it's like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. It just doesn't, trying to extrapolate that from this. And also, let's see here. Let's see what else they said. North Korean troop deployment is a dramatic step. This is according to a professor in Seoul. And so, let's see.
Those professors, those analysts, they've been continuously right about everything.
They've always been right, Matthew. Like, bro, are we even one to correct them? I mean, like, how many times have they said stuff that's been against what we said and they've been right? Like, I think like 80% of the time they've been wrong. Like, to be entirely honest, I think it's like 80% of the time they've been wrong. And the other
also, folks, why they're wrong. It's not that we're trying to be arrogant or something like that. When it comes to predicting stuff in foreign policy and also international relations, it's nearly impossible. Like, it doesn't matter how well educated you are on the subject. Your guess is as good as the next person's guess because there's really no like 100% concrete predictability to any actions taken around the world. And even though you can kind of like have a good direction to go, like, oh, they might do this because of their past actions, you can never 100% predict anything. So when like you see a comment like that about, China's not going to be happy about North Korea deploying troops, it's like, how do you know that? It's like, there might be like some secret meetings taking place where they're like, okay, like if North Korea sends troops, then China will like secretly support that. We don't know. We're in the public. We're not behind closed doors. So it's just like a bunch of guesswork.
And also, I want to throw this out there. This is one that's interesting, and this is a different way to look at things than how we would look at it, and I'll tell you all the historical precedent as to why this isn't really the correct way to look at it from what I would know. China's wariness has been evident since April when it sent one of its most senior officials, Zhao Leji, to Pyongyang. While the two sides did not reveal the details of the talks, analysts said, and where do they get that information? That Beijing was unhappy about the prospect of losing influence over North Korea, which it sees as a crucial buffer state against the United States-backed South Korea. Now, this is a completely incorrect way of looking at the situation with North Korea, because historically, the Chinese never had a 100% iron-clad grip over North Korea. It was actually largely shared in between the Soviet Union and China, and that's why, for a good while, up until the mid-70s, North Korea was economically far more successful than South Korea, is because both China and the Soviet Union were throwing a massive amount of aid towards the North Koreans, just so that way they could vie to try and pull them more towards their direction, the Soviet or the Chinese direction, than the other. This is looking at this, at least this statement is being made, that China has always had complete control over North Korea, and the Russians, in any way, shape, or form, have never had any attempt or any shot at having any kind of influence over North Korea, which is markedly untrue, because that was, like, China having a non-ironclad grip over North Korea has always been the case. Like, the only reason they even tried to send them aid to compete with the Soviets is because they didn't want the Soviets to completely control North Korea, and so they only wanted to match what the Soviets were sending. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, y'all know why the famine began inside of North Korea? It's because, one, a massive flood hit them and pretty much wiped out all of their agriculture industry inside of North Korea, and two, the Chinese went, well, if the Soviets aren't even giving y'all aid and we don't really have to battle with them, you know, to have y'all on our side, why are we giving y'all aid anyways? We're just going to pretty much cut most of that off and save ourselves the trouble. And that's why the Great Famine started. This is looking at this in an entirely different way, and it's just not reflective of the actual history or the dynamics in between China and North Korea that have existed for 75 years. Because yes, these people here in this article are saying that China did come and support North Korea during the Korean War. But that did not mean that North Korea was in China's pocket permanently up until now, and now that's being jeopardized. China and North Korea have always been somewhat uneasy friends, the best way to put it, and they've never been ironclad with each other like this article is trying to suggest. So it's this article is reading into a lot, in my opinion, that isn't really there. Like, that's my opinion on this. And there's a lot of articles out there like this one right now, and it just doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense. And let's see. China, let's see. Hold up. This doesn't make any sense either to me. China's concerns include becoming potentially embroiled in the conflict itself, and it doesn't really clarify whether that's Ukraine or the Korean Peninsula, if North Korean troops' involvement in the fighting against Ukraine made the Asian country, Beijing's only military alliance, a legitimate target for Kyiv. It's like, that wouldn't draw China in at all. Like the Ukrainians could send in agents into North Korea, which I don't know how that would work, considering that there are no Europeans living in North Korea, so it'd be pretty hard to get a Ukrainian spy who looks like an Eastern European into a country that doesn't have any foreigners living in it at all, and then have them blowing up stuff. How in the world would that tie China in, though? Like, that wouldn't tie them in at all. That doesn't even make any sense. Like, because
that's absurd. That's absurd to think that whoever's like behind this quote in this article thinks that Ukraine is going to target North Korea. It's like, do you really think they're going to target North Korea? That's like around the world almost.
Yeah, it's like they don't even have a drone that's capable of flying all the way to Vladivostok yet. Why in the world would they be flying stuff into Pyongyang? Or how in the world would they even do that? And if they did, it would have to be ground operatives that are doing that in North Korea, and that means there would be so much plausible deniability as to what actually happened each time an attack occurred that the Chinese wouldn't get involved, because there would be no clear evidence to say, yep, the Ukrainians did it, so let's go. That doesn't make any sense at all. And this is coming from a Shanghai-based international relations professor. You know, like, these are the kind of, like, statements. Like, I don't know what goes on in academic circles sometimes. Academic circles do come up with the brilliant things sometimes, but this is living in fantasy land. Like, I don't, like, maybe they're an international relations professor, so they don't even span over at all into actual military abilities of the countries that they're talking about, but the Ukrainians do not have intercontinental abilities to be able to strike North Korea right now with anything. So how in the world would that even be an issue? Or how in the world would that even come up? And even so, why in the world would China have to get involved? They have a defensive pact with them, but that's for an invasion of North Korea. Ukraine will never have the ability to invade them. They would just have the ability, if anything, to bomb them. So I don't even get where that's coming from.
Yeah, and also, by the way, international relations professors do not get into war tactics or also like the type of weapons possessed by like countries like Ukraine. So you're correct, they do not know that. So to even make a statement like this, not knowing what weapons they possess, is a little bit ignorant, because obviously, even if they possess the weapons, Ukraine is not going to start launching attacks on North Korea, which is over there in a different area of the world, while they're fighting a war on their home front. They're not going to ever do that, because that would be crazy to start a war like that.
Yeah, also another thing, someone just said, well, doesn't the next paragraph explain it? Yeah, we just talked about that, about the treaty that the Chinese and the North Koreans have. But let me just put this out there. Let me go get the treaty for y'all. Chinese North Korean treaty. Here we go. This was signed in 1961. 1961, all right? So I want to just make this very clear, all right? This is a very, very old treaty. And while treaties are a lot more binding than, say, a memorandum, like the Budapest Memorandum, this thing is so old. The Chinese could just say, times changed. I mean, we're not really going to come to y'all's aid like that. They could do that. Like, we did that with the memorandum. We were like, it wasn't really in writing. It's not really enforceable. And times were different. So, we're just going to chill. That's what we did to Ukraine. Why in the world do we act like now the Chinese have to go, yes, this will embroil us in a conflict against the West and completely screw over our concept of national rejuvenation. And we'll be also sidelining all Chinese interests for the North Koreans for no damn sense at all. But let's go get involved in this anyways, just for them. Like, that makes no sense. That doesn't even make any sense knowing how the Chinese operate in the modern day. The Chinese work on a policy of China comes first. They will not make decisions that will go against the national security interests or overall the interests of the central government of China. So for them to get involved in a war in Ukraine in support of North Korea, because North Korea got bombed or invaded, would make absolutely no sense, because at that point they would become an enemy of the West, just like everyone else has that's gotten involved in this at this point, and the sanctions would come rolling in, and the freaking, I mean, the backlash from that economically in China would be insane. Like, yes, it would be in the West as well, but for the Chinese, it would be the end of times. Like, they would be thinking they're going through the literal rapture or something over there. People would be starving to death. Like, people wouldn't have jobs. It would literally be the Great Depression in Chinese form over there. They would not want that, and they're not going to put themselves in that situation for the North Koreans. Like, that's why these articles just seem like fluff to me. And it really kind of aggravates me when these kinds of articles come out, because it's like, how in the world do we know any of this? And literally all of this analysis in this entire article is being written because 3 words, friendly neighboring country, was not put in a letter that was sent to the North Koreans this year. That's literally why the entire article is written, like, just for those 3 words. And that's what it's like. This is just like, sometimes you do have to read into stuff, and we do that here on this channel, but this is reading into stuff way too much. Like, the Chinese could literally not care, for all we know. They may actually be in support of this a little bit, or they may not actually like it, but this being the only evidence that we have that they're pissed, supposedly, that's just trying to read into this way too much, in my opinion.
I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah, and also, let's see how it rounds out. I'm very interested. China remains in the driving seat because it has control over both countries. What? How? Like, I understand they have, like, some decent economic grip, but they're just, wait a minute, hang on. This contradicts everything they just said a minute ago, Matthew, because didn't they just say China's unhappy because they're losing influence over North Korea because Russia's going to steal them from them, and then at the end of it they say, well, they have control over them anyways, both of them? It's like, then why would they care if the Russians are stealing them away? They still have control over both of them, so why would they be unhappy? Like, that doesn't, y'all see what I'm getting at? Like, I hope you'll see what I'm getting at. Some of this doesn't even make sense at all. It's contradicting each other. The entire end to this article contradicts the entire middle part, which was right here. Let's see here. Let me make sure I get it. Let's see here. Hang on, I gotta make sure that I find this. Dang, it was further up, I think. Sharp escalation. Here we go. Chinese president, here we go. China was unhappy with his regime's deepening ties with Moscow. So if the Chinese understand that they control both of these parties, and these people are saying that they do, what in the world would it matter if the underlings to China are getting a little bit more buddy-buddy with each other? They still control both of them. So why in the world would they be unhappy with them? This would literally be like France and Italy getting closer together, and America gets pissed off with them. That makes no sense. Like, if y'all...
Yeah, it's just word soup all the way around. It makes no sense, really.
Yeah, and so I hope that answers that question. Well, it's a great question, by the way, because loads of people have been bringing this up in Mara Spin City. This is actually a really good question, but it always annoys me with articles like that because they pretty much spin this intricate web of stuff that either contradicts itself, like I just showed, or it has no backing in actual reality or fact at all. Like, when we actually break that down, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever on any point. I bet you will probably get flamed by the Financial Times on Twitter now. Like, they'll come to our Twitter account and be like, you do anything? And we'll be like, yeah. Like, I'll be like, we kind of do, because if you're writing articles like that, that just doesn't make any sense. And there's been loads of people who've been writing articles like that, but that's also why.
I mean, like, why are you guys writing articles about international relations anyway? You're the Financial Times. You're not like the World Times or something like that.
Yeah, and also that's why, like, I feel like it's a lot better, just to also explain this too, for us to say when we don't know something on this channel that we declare ignorance, because we are ignorant on some topics. And we don't know at the moment what Chinese-Korean relations look like at the moment, because it could be good, it could be bad, but that's going to be entirely internally held in between the Chinese government and North Korea. That sort of stuff will never be vented publicly. They will never even give an indication of anything publicly. Like, that they won't, because from what everyone understands on the outside, and the Chinese and the North Koreans know this, everyone thinks that they're buddy-buddy with each other, and they're not going to disrupt that and make that look different. Both of these countries are heavily invested in their image, and also the image of the kind of control that they have in the area. China is trying to make itself look like a strongman to further market itself to other countries in the Indian Ocean area, if you want to call it that. And so what in the world would make them look strong if it isn't them completely throwing a temper tantrum over the North Koreans walking away from them? That would make them look weak. So they're not going to do that. And the North Koreans want to make it look like the Chinese back them up. So they're not going to get heavily offended over anything, because if the Chinese are saying stuff to them that makes them unhappy behind the scenes, they can't come out and say that, because then it looks like they're now alienated from their only major partner that backs them, which is China. So I hope that does address all of that the best I can with that. Not that I know that I'm sounding like very hyped up about this, and I'm not hyped up about you asking questions. I'm just hyped up about stories that come out like that really have like no backing in reality at all, and it's like just trying to spin up the story out of nothing, quite literally. Like, there's no video or picture evidence or even official government statements to back that up. It's literally just trying to read into something that probably is nothing. But with that, I hope that does address that question the best I can. I hope that was a really good analysis of that article. Like, that's just one of many. So, you know, like, we're not like just taking a dump on the Financial Times, but they were one of the people who put out an article like that, and I don't know why they do that. But anyways, moving on from that and into Ukraine, we did get to see that within Western Ukraine, a new bicar factory will be opening. There's a massive load of details about this by August of 2025 next year, which will be hoping to produce a large amount of drones for the Ukrainian armed forces, and apparently will be able to produce about 120 large-scale drones by the end of the next year. These drones will most likely be by Rakhtars like y'all are seeing right here, but there is a wide variety of other kinds of drones that the Baykar company produces, and some of these could also be produced at the factory as well. But moving on from that and into Kyiv, we also were able to hear that the Ukrainians are requesting NATO intervention. According to the head of Zelensky's office, the DPRK military already in the Kursk region, and NATO must act. It's crucial to prevent future aggression, said Andrei Yermak. Otherwise, the threat extends to the Baltic states and friendly nations in the Balkans. If Ukraine does not stop this invasion, they could be next. And so it seems as though they are asking for NATO to get involved again. We have a feeling we will certainly not be getting involved. But moving on from that and into the location unknowns, we also have some interesting stuff down here. We were able to see a Ukrainian Leopard 2 A4 in service, and the pics do go hard. Incredibly hard. Real hard. Long-lasting. And great to see the Leopard 2 A4 down there doing its thing. Moving on from that, we also got to see an Australian volunteer with an anti-drone gun. We haven't seen a lot of these things actually in this phase of the war, but it is interesting to see that here and there they still pop up occasionally. Also, we were able to see that a BVS-10, a Swedish amphibious all-terrain personnel carrier, was in operation today in training, fording rivers within a deeper part of western Ukraine, most likely. But we can see it here, moving around and traveling down this interesting river. And it's always cool to see these things just because they're unique. And we also got to see the Russian casualty report as well, and the losses were bussin'.
Oh man, those losses are crazy in pretty much every category but the Bobcats. Only one Bobcat today, sadly, which is a dying shame, I must say. But you know what else is a dying shame? These other losses. Enforcer, tell us more.
Man, I gotta tell you. Also, a big shout out to Miss Disa, the keeper of the records. Miss Disa said the 1,440 personnel lost is the 12th highest troop loss, and it is tied with September 21st of 2024, along with 100 fuel trucks, or supply trucks for the large part, being destroyed as the 7th highest daily loss in that category over the course of the war. But 1,440 soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 23 APCs, 100 supply trucks, 4 main battle tanks, 39 artillery pieces, 79 drones, well, 73 drones actually, and 1 Bobcat skid steer. Overall, it was a very good day, and we love to see it. We love to see it. Moving on from that, though, and out of the casualty report, we were able to see that the Ukrainians have apparently started to use a new kind of a drone behind the lines in the Belgrade area, as a magnetic detonation sensor was used on this drone today. And check it out. We can see the drone right over there. And what is this? Oh!
Oh, damn.
It's a
He got
landmine.
blasted.
Нихуя себе.
A whole lot of shrapnel.
Man, dude, a whole lot of shrapnel. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see what the anti-drone operations that we see from those little FPV drones hitting the Russian drones, what they actually look like from a third-person perspective. So check this out. That's what that looks like. Like, I actually thought it would look a lot more dramatic than that, but it honestly looks like two toys hit each other and then just broke apart, to, like, be entirely honest. Like, putting some...
It looks like it's like in a movie or something, the way it comes up there and does that. Also, that drone is, like, moving extremely fast to be able to overspeed that flying wing right there, to be able to, like, hit it. That thing has got some, like, power behind it.
Yeah, it really does. And also, man, you could put like some Lego falling apart sounds on that thing and it would fit. But anyways, moving on from that and into our next clip, a little bit further down the lines and in the area of Kremena, you were also able to see some Brazilian volunteers with a great amount of vril fighting in the area of the Kremena forest in September. We were able to get the footage today. We see him here with the fowl. A delicious fowl. Fowls are amazing.
12 o'clock.
Scout ou move? Tá caindo muito para a direita e perto. Essa posição eu quero que você guarde ela. Mas eu quero que você jogue o tiro para a esquerda e inclina ele um pouquinho mais para ele ir mais longe. É. Yeah. Capoeira!
Here's the firefight going on now.
Eu
Just
quero
beginning.
granada no primeiro lugar que você bateu. Primeiro lugar que você bateu, aqui.
Tá.
Vai. O primeiro tiro que você deu.
You see him laying down shots with that foul. Oh, buddy. I love the foul.
Looks like he's getting foul on them Russians.
Go back.
Man, he's really giving him that foul
Go.
work. Here, a little machine gun fire as the volunteers continue to move around and slaw. But nevertheless, interesting to see. Moving on from that, we also got to see the K2 Battalion of the 54th Mechanized Brigade knocking out Russians around Seversk with their drones. Look at this one. He's like in a Kentucky Derby, but it's not a Kentucky. Oh my goodness. Well, I'll tell you something, man. They're pretty accurate with those. Oh, we can see a little car veering off a road there. Getting a little bumpy there. Oh, you see the Russian car trying to slowly meander its way around the fields, not knowing that it's in the line of fire, in jeopardy's way. I would like to take some Russians for 300. All right, what is the capital of Russia? Why, it's Moscow. Well, there you go. You just won the 300 here on Russian Jeopardy, and any second now we're about to see that prize is won. Look, you can actually see the number 3 on the side of the thing for the 300 number question here on Russian Jeopardy, and we can see that the Russians are firing back at the drone with some sort of a tracer, but nevertheless, this will not help them much at all, as they are about to start dropping the bomblets on them. But this Russian car is resilient. It just means it will keep going.
Come on, speed up just a little bit. Don't you like to live? Just speed up a tad. Just 5 miles per hour.
Have you ever wanted to see the Russian Federation get their damn stupid-looking Toyota-looking truck get blown up in the middle of broad daylight? Well, then you, my friend, are in luck. Introducing the all-new SPG-9, slamming down heat rounds on them while they're trying to run for their lives in their stupid Toyota car. Watch them as they hop out of the car and the drone starts dropping bomblets on them. Look at them go. There goes a bomblet right there, dropping down right in front of the engine bay and giving the Russians a run for their money. Watch as the driver starts backing up over that guy's leg. Look as the chaos ensues, as they try and hide behind the MTLB just right next door, as the guy in the car keeps on backing up over everyone. Tell him to slow it on down a little, not to back it up too much. And we can see a Russian right there folding down in the field. He's getting ready to take a little lie down and a nice nap here in this wonderful day. We can see the car is finally making its way into a crater where it somehow did not get stuck, and they're now leaving their friends long behind. Goodbye, buddies. We won't see you again. We can see that he was dragging someone's nuts off the back of that truck right there. You can see that just right out the back. And there he goes. I guess that was Hot Dog Man finally dragging his nuts over our hometown. Laugh track inserted for humor, but nevertheless, we can see... I like that. But nevertheless...
Oh, let me give you the... Oh, my name is Jeff, and I like that one. Oh,
yeah, better yet, my name is my name is Elon. Whatever it was.
oh my goodness.
Wow.
Oh, damn.
Big crowd. Dude, he literally turned into Chekhov from Star Trek. I was like, what the hell? Oh my god. Oh man.
You know, those Russians out there in that field, they're getting hit real hard. Oh!
Here we can see the Russians laying around in the fields. Their manager's about to come by and ask them what are they doing out there, and they're about to say they're sleeping on the job. Little does the Russian commander know that might be a permanent slumber. Well, you see right here one of our Russian fellers near this tree line. He's trying to figure out exactly what in the world he's going to do. It looks as though he's starting to crawl down the tree line away from that MTLB and towards that other Russian soldier sitting out in that field. He's making it just a little closer every day, and he knows that if he can get near that sleeping Russian, that Rolex is his, baby. The Rolex watch on that Russian soldier sleeping in the field isn't even his. He stole it off of another Ukrainian somewhere in the occupied territories and has been wearing it. He claims it's a trophy, but little does he know it was marked with an unfortunate fate. One like the Twilight Zone, where Rod Serling would tell you some wacky shit that would happen to someone or something like that. But that Rolex had his name on it, that's for sure. You now see the Russian over there in the tree line. He's just sitting there trying to figure out what he's about to do next. We can now see our drone camera panning around as another Russian car comes into view, already flaming hot with the anticipation of getting hit with that heat round. And old buddy, are those Russians in heat right there. They're about to get hopping out of that car, ready to run for whatever kind of cover they can get. And we can see here another Russian vehicle making an absolute run for it with the number 1 painted onto the front hood. It's getting slammed by every single explosive in the area. FPV drones, recoilless rifles. And finally, it appears it's really getting slammed.
Give them the phases, number 1.
Give them the phases, number 1. Aye, sir. Like, and they just roast someone alive or something like that. Dude, I always liked when they used the actual starships lasers in Star Trek in The Next Generation, which was very rare, but it would like they would be like, there's a person down here, number 1. I want this bitch vaporized. And they would just like hit him with like the giant phaser. It's like, isn't that overkill? Like y'all have little phasers that y'all could just use. Also, how in the world did they aim those things? Considering they were like tubes practically, you held them like a cylinder. Like, how in the world do you aim down the sights for that thing? I don't even know.
I don't think they were going for realism. I think they were just going for theatrics or something like that. Look at this, though. Dang, man. Those guys are getting singed.
Number 2 just got blown up. And
get the fire extinguisher, number 2.
Number 1, status report. Sir, we are burning. That is not good, number 1. Help!
shot, we can see the Russian delivery vehicle on fire as the Russians decide to cower into the craters, seeking warmth. The warmth of the burning vehicle is just simply too hot for these Russians, and they have decided to sit it out in a slightly warm crater. The Russians do understand a sense of irony in the situation, as the vehicle was called Number 2, and most of these Russians have proceeded to take a Number 2 in their britches. We can now see the Ukrainians laying down heat rounds onto the Russians, only making sure to remind them that the craters are quite warm, maybe too warm. Many of them are beginning to run for the hills, as they have decided that this kind of a bombardment is simply too much. The fledgling Russians try and find a way to make it off the beach, much like a young turtle, a sea turtle, actually. That would not happen if David Attenborough was actually doing this. He would know what kind of animal it was. But nevertheless, I don't.
You know what really happened here is they brought in the Russians to try to ward them off, and they couldn't ward them off, so they threw some red number 5 on this tank, and it got flammable, and then the uranium it mixed in, and it caught and created smoke that was toxic, and it's worse when the whales got involved, and then the worms.
The Russians have been...
The worms, oh my God.
The Russians have been force-fed red number 5, until they can no longer see in other colors rather than red. This man here is seeing a lot of red. He has decided to look at the sun. He's most likely blind.
Red number 5 all over the place. The ground's full of red number 5. Oh my God, get it away.
We can see here, as I hear Matthew take a deep breath into his microphone, that the Russians have decided to make a break for it.
I was actually talking, but the damn lag monster came back and it was trying to get me. It's the curse of the Kennedy.
Someone asked, what the F am I listening to? You are listening to the Enforcer channel. You clicked on it. What the hell do you think it is? We can see a Russian doing a very skimpy dance as he high walks across the battlefield. I don't know what the hell he's doing. That's why I'm stuttering so much. I don't really understand.
If he would have just eaten his Wheaties, he could have gone a little bit faster and ran off from that one.
If only he had found the whale, he would have been able to survive. And then there's something like that.
You see, the worms got in his head, and they said, well, what happened? And it was the worm the whole time. He said, yeah, yeah.
As the worm began to enter Mr. Kennedy's brain, he decided that it was starving, for there was no brain matter to consume, or something like that.
And then it died. How's it die in an environment full of rich, juicy brain? How's it die?
He stated that he would eat another 8 brainworms and subject them to starvation as well. Just something like that. Dude,
how's a brainworm die in the brain, though? I mean, can somebody explain that to me real quick? How does okay, first of all, how's the worm get in the brain? Nobody's really asking that question. That's a question that should be asked. How did that worm get in the brain, first of all? That's an interesting question. And number 2 is, when the worm got there, it's like it just arrived in the pantry of heaven for a worm or something like that, food galore, and all of a sudden the brain worm dies instantly. What happened? What happened?
No, man. You know what happens, man? The worm committed, worm murder or something like that. We're going to end this clip right here, by the way. But the worm committed, worm murder. And so he was put on a worm trial. And they were like, order in the court. We have found the accused to be guilty of worm murder. And then the worm was like, I'll do it again. I'll kill everyone. And then the worms were like, we sentence him to being imprisoned in the brain. And the worm said, I'll eat my way out. RFK's brain. Oh, no. No, not that one. It's what?
Listen, somebody said, wait a minute, somebody said it was the deer. It was a parasite in the food.
What?
But it still didn't explain, how it got to the brain, though. If you ingest, venison, with just deer meat, and how's the worm get to the brain? How does that work? I'm obviously not a doctor, and I don't understand those things, but, what, it go through the bloodstream or something? Somebody said the bloodstream. Still, though, how?
I believe, nevertheless, this endeavor into discovering the unfortunate demise of this worm has led us to the conclusion that politicians do not have brains.
There's something like that, but moving on.
Don't worry, the worm did not suffer 1 minute.
Bro, that worm went in there and it heard like it was about to find treasure, and then it went and he saw what was in there, and he's like, ah, and then just died. It's like, bro.
It was humane. The worm did not suffer for a single second. I said, I want this worm to go out the easy way. I don't want it to suffer.
Also, by the way, I do have to make this clear so that way folks know we're not making like we don't I'm not going to say we like or dislike him. I'm sure he's a nice guy if you talk to him. But it is funny to joke about. So just letting y'all know. But moving on from that, we did get to see that the Ukrainians did blow up a building that had Russians inside of it today and buried them in rubble. Would y'all like to see? Of course you would like to see. We have the video right here.
People were talking about the deer in the video, man. They weren't even saying the deer. It's like I thought they were saying the guy ate venison and he got the worm, the brain worm that way. They were talking about a deer in the video.
Dude, I didn't see a deer. Like, I don't know what they're talking about. I didn't even see a deer. But anyways, moving on from that building that did just collapse on those Russians, we're now going to be moving on down to Hrodivka, where we got to see a Ukrainian Bradley firing a tow. It's one of the few times we've ever seen this from its tow launcher and slamming a Russian position in the trees. And that's the end of the clip. This is from the 47th Brigade, but for some reason, this was apparently in the Kursk area, from what we know. But moving on from that and down into the Pisky area, we also got to see that the Russians crashed their bikes today. If my mother had the wheels, she would have been a bike. And there we go. And there they are. There's the bikes.
Man, it looks like the bike activities are not going too well for those Russians. It looks like, oh goodness, it's not going good.
It doesn't look as though it is going good.
Is that mud on the road, or is that just my imagination?
It looks like mud to me, man. It looks like they're like on the slip and slide of mud down there.
I'm not gonna lie, it's actually pretty good. Never mind. There he went.
Oh.
I was about to say this guy's driving pretty good to like not be sliding down the mud, but oh damn, both of them got crashed.
Man. Ooh, rough time for them. Not the greatest bike riders, are they? Moving on from that, though, and towards the area of the town of Kurakove, we got to see some Russian forces also getting slammed in this direction. We ain't playing that one. Also, I have to say this. I always find this so weird. All right, I'm just going to tell y'all this. Every time we do one guy's voice, every time we do this voice, there's no opposition to it. Whoa, 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 look, Jack, every time we do this one, there isn't any either. But when we do this one, someone has a problem every time. It's like, I can't help that's his voice. Like, if we want, like what am I supposed to do? Make RFK not sound like RFK when we make a joke about him? Like, really? Like, have some sense, folks. Like, if we didn't make the voice sound like RFK, y'all wouldn't even know it is that person we're joking about. Like, that's the whole point of the gig. Like, I'm not apologizing for that. That's stupid. That'd be like saying, oh my god, are you making fun of the other two guys because their voices sound like that? They can't help it. It's like, that's the whole gag. Like, that's their voice. That's what they sound like. Like, that the whole joke would lose its value if we didn't imitate their voice. You know, like, I don't even get people like that. But we can see Russians getting roasted down there.
The name of that drone was Zaluki Babri.
Man, they were coming up with creative names on that one.
Hello, Babri.
Oh, what's going on down there? There was something moving down there. Oh, and they got that tank up in the lead. And they got another one right there. Oh, man, I'm telling you. They're slamming them. Just like I'm slamming out subscribers. There goes another 100. Like, they're going.
I could see more Russians getting hit. Someone said, do the Teddy Roosevelt voice. I don't even know what Teddy Roosevelt sounds like, to be entirely honest, because, like, the only recording they have of him is, like, this really, like, old recording, and those were really high pitch. Everyone sounded like this. Oh, wait, hang on.
Everyone sounded like this in the old recordings, and so you never really know exactly what they sounded like.
And so I'm like, I don't know, what did he really sound like? And I haven't heard, like, a remastered, like, audio clip of him to do it. Oh, I did see someone say what I can do, though.
Now look, I may have been president, but when the president does something, he's not guilty.
There's something like that. I can't do that one.
I like that line of reasoning. It's just, I'll do whatever the hell I want wrong, and there's going to be no consequences. What do you say about that? And everybody's like, yes, sir, that sounds great.
Listen, everyone in this country has to follow the law. But when it comes to me, laws are toilet paper. I wipe my ass with them.
But anyway, so moving on from that down into Tehran, we did get to hear that Iran will respond, apparently, by this upcoming Saturday. That's according to information that has come out by the Iranians, and also based off of Israeli intelligence as well. That was then corroborated, as some like to say, across the aisle inside of Israel, as we did get to hear that the Israelis do believe a counterattack is coming. We don't know when, but it is apparently coming, probably within this next week. So we do know that's within the next week. We don't know the exact time during that span. However, we did get to see that the Hezbollah command center within southern Lebanon was hit. And it was hit quite well indeed. Here's the clip. And there goes the missile. Just right off screen.
Hey, wait a minute. Nightbot. Let's see here. Nightbot, a fake person who named themselves Nightbot and came in with the same Nightbot logo, just came in and said, should have stayed in law school. I was about to say, Nightbot, you're about to get fired for that one. Like, you were about to get canned for that one, but Nightbot is safe. He is safe. He was actually doing his job just fine. This imposter came in and decided to take a quick jab at us. But don't worry, Nightbot, he's gone.
Unfortunate indeed. But before we move on out of the Middle East, we do have a very interesting question for all of you. Analysis do say that intel suggests Iran will respond forcefully to Israel's attack very soon. What are y'all's thoughts on that? Matthew, what is everyone thinking, and what are you thinking as well?
All right, so we are hearing now that contrary to what we had heard before, that Iran may not respond to the Israeli response to their initial attack, it looks like intel is now suggesting that Iran is going to respond forcefully to Israel's attack very soon. And about 40% of the people said Iran will attack forcefully, while another 40% said Iran's response will be weak, so pretty evenly distributed there amongst the audience, and 12% said I don't expect any response at all. And it looks to me like Iran probably is going to respond sometime starting next week. I'm not really sure what the extent of it's going to look like. It looks like some analysts are saying that Iran actually still has the ability to launch a full-scale attack like they did a while back. I really honestly have some doubts about that. I really think that Iran has been crippled for a pretty good bit. And even if they had the capability to launch an offensive attack, all their defensive air defense, the little bit that they had, has been knocked offline by Israel's last attack. So it's really just a big cluster over there right now, and I think the response might be weak, because I don't think Iran wants to get blasted by Israel. But anyways, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, as my esophagus almost collapsed there, but I caught it with some great esophagus restructuring technology. I would say that the Iranians are probably going to attack fairly forcefully, because the past two times they've attacked Israel, the first one was pretty big. I think it was the biggest one in the region in history. The second one was even bigger than that, and I would assume the third one's going to be fairly sizable as well. Even if they lack the long-term abilities to sustain growing strikes in terms of size, I think that they will make this third strike an incredibly big one and hope to maybe try and deal the crippling blow they've been trying to deal to Israel for the last two strikes so far. That's what I would think at the moment. I'm not really sure how that would pan out, but I guess only time would tell, wouldn't it, heavens? But moving on out of the Middle Eastern area, we are moving on up into Ukraine to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 977 of the war. And so without further ado, here is the speech. And we ain't having that.
Give him a speech. Hello, my fellow Ukrainians. I hope you're in good health.
Hello, my fellow Ukrainians. I hope you're doing well. Today I mastered my math class or something like that. But anyways, here's the speech. Speech.
Дорогі українці, українки, сьогодні готуємось до роботи з партнерами на тижні. Зокрема, з нашими європейськими партнерами, з тими, хто підтримує нас дуже принципово дуже дієво. Ми створили цей новий формат співпраці Україна плюс країни Північної Європи. І в рамках цього формату незмінно нарощуємо нашу взаємодію – оборонну, політичну, економічну. І в основі всього цього наша ціннісна взаємодія. Те, як ми бачимо життя в Європі. Те, якою ми хочемо передати нашу Європу наступним поколінням. Точно безпечною, точно демократичною, точно здатною захищати інтереси європейців. Я вдячний кожній країні з цього нашого формату. Фінляндія, Швеція, Норвегія, Данія, Ісландія. Дякую вам. Очікуємо від всіх партнерів підтримки плану перемоги. Всі вони однаково розуміють, наскільки важливо бути рішучими. Розуміють, що треба створювати проблеми агресору, щоб Росія втрачала можливість псувати життя світу. Ми будемо говорити з нордиками про нові принципові кроки, які можуть посилити тиск на Росію за цю війну і заради чесної дипломатії. Тож, дипломатичних новин і нових пакетів підтримки України має бути наступного тижня більше. Звичайно, ключові і пріоритети – це підтримка наших позицій на найскладніших напрямках, підтримка наших воїнів, внутрішнього виробництва зброї, зокрема дронів. Данія зробила відповідні вагомі інвестиції. Працюємо зараз з партнерами, щоб приєднались. Окремо працюємо і на рівні країн, і на рівні найбільших світових компаній, виробників енергетичного обладнання для посилення нашої енергосистеми перед зимою. Це стосується передусім прикордонних і прифронтових громад, таких наших міст, як Суми, Харків та інші, які знаходяться надто близько до російської території. Урядовці та відповідні дипломатичні наші представники, енергетичні компанії мають чіткі завдання, в тому числі і щодо партнерів у Північній Європі. Ми будемо зміцнювати цю роботу. І ще кілька речей. Я хочу зараз подякувати за цей тиждень кільком нашим бойовим бригадам. Це 25-та окрема повітряно-десантна, це 79-та десантно-штурмова, 35-та окрема бригада морської піхоти, 65-та окрема механізована, 425-й окремий штурмовий батальйон і 27-ма окрема артилерійська бригада. Просто молодці воїни. На різних напрямках проявили себе однаково добре заради України. Були сьогодні також доповіді головкома Сирського, фронт і Курська операція, та міністра оборони України Умєрова щодо контрактів для внутрішнього виробництва зброї. І сьогодні було багато сказано про українську мову, про українську культуру. Сьогодні відзначаємо День української писемності та мови. І в такий день важливо сказати, що тільки справжніми результатами реально зберігається все наше, все українське. Ми в цій війні боремось проти ворога, який намагається знищити в Україні все. Все українське. І тому кожна дія заради нашої держави, кожен результат на посилення України мають непересічне значення. Виграти цю війну можемо ми всі лише разом. І вберегти Україну можемо лише разом. Не кожен сам для себе, а всі для України. І саме так маємо працювати щодня. Всі для України. Кожен на своєму рівні, кожен на своєму місці. Дякую за всі результати заради України. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
And with that, that is the end of Zelensky's speech here on day 977 of the news of the war in Ukraine. And that moves us on into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to all of y'all. And isn't it always a fun segment to get to do? To get to talk to each and every one of you that we've been able to get live chat questions from. And I was able to see someone ask a very interesting question. Is Zelensky a foamer? I don't know. I wonder if he is. Maybe one day we'll be able to find out. But I have a feeling that time will never come. But it's like to, at least for this channel, getting an interview with Zelensky, I'm sorry, that would be unlikely. But with that, I hope that does address that at least the best I can, at least in my opinion. But with that, Matthew, take it away. I understand that we have some more top downers of the night. Who are these folks? And let us hear their names so that way we can thank them.
All right, so let's call off our remaining top donors of the night, and these are actually 4 of them. The first one here is Y. Jovian, who put in a 50, along with Tom S., who also put in a 50, as well as Steve Watkins, who is still at work, unbelievably so. This is the longest shift ever, but huge shout out to Steve Watkins, and also a huge shout out to Skip Tracer 007 for also putting in a 50. And a huge shout out to all 4 of you and everyone else who's donated tonight. We appreciate it very much. Another fundraiser on a Sunday night, smashed with the goal. Absolutely wonderful to see, and I'm very happy for it. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to give a massive thanks to every single one of y'all who has been enjoying this stream tonight. Not only that, supporting the fundraiser massively. Y'all have blown this thing out of the water. It's gotten up to $3,647 at this point, and it's thanks to each and every single one of y'all, the folks we can call out and the folks we can't call out, that have made this thing possible. And so a massive congratulations to each and every one of y'all. And without further ado, let's get to talking to each and every one of y'all, hopefully, here in this next segment. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so real quick, I did see a live chat question that just came in a moment ago. It's from Natalia Cherebenyanko. I think I said your last name correctly. I can't believe it. I thought I was going to butcher that, but thank you very much, Natalia, for the good question here. They said, did y'all see that Iran's leader stepped down? And I just checked that because I was thinking maybe some breaking news just came out or something that Khamenei did step down. It looks like he's still there, but the reports are, according to some news outlets, that he is terminally ill with some type of really bad illness, and he's currently looking to name a successor after he passes on, or after he croaks. So I don't see him stepping down right now. It looks like he's still there, unfortunately. But once again, remember, he has a terminal illness, and he's also on the Israeli hit list. So it's really unclear which one's going to get him first. The Israelis might actually get him first, now that I think about it. But Enforcer, what say you?
The Israelis will get him first. The Israelis move quicker than any illness. Like, to be entirely honest, man. Like, dude, Khamenei is like, I'm down with the sickness, and the Israelis are like, so are we. Like, just drop a JDAM on him instantly. It's like that's gonna get him first without a doubt, man. But yeah, it's coming around that he'll eventually be replaced, probably here very soon. But what will get him? I'm betting on the Israelis, to be entirely honest. But with that, I hope that. Well, actually, you know what? There's actually 3 things that could get Khamenei, Matthew. You know what those 3 things are? It's the sickness, the Israelis, or a lunchly. One of those 3 things will kill him. Oh. It's like one of those 3 will. We don't know which one, but if there are any lunchlies in Iran, oh, Khamenei, no, like, don't eat it. It's filled with mold. Also, man, like, that's crazy, man. Like, hearing about what's happened with that today, it's like, yikes. Like, that's not a good thing, especially when you start getting investigations opened into stuff like that. It's like, that's not good. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question here is actually not a question. It's our Morse code decoders of the night. We got to get that Morse, and tonight we had the whole roster. It was Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Her Royal Fluffiness, and Arabelle Garbo, the entire roster. And they said, Enforcer Ellison Morse code decipher says, Russians weep over the loss of such precious alcohol stores, and they will truly be sadly missed. And LLT, LSA.
And that's the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all and thank y'all for getting that correct tonight. Y'all have continued to get that thing correct time and time again, and we always have to congratulate y'all for that, because if it was not for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to know what the Morse code message actually says. And so, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got another question about the Iranian leader, the supreme great grand leader of Iran, as he likes to call himself. This question comes from Strobex. He said, do you think the terminal illness was a preemptive retcon to hide Israeli success? And in my opinion, I would say no. Khamenei is still alive. And remember, the guy is 85 years old, so he is definitely not a young man, to say the least. He is basically getting pretty on up there. I was about to say near death, but, you know, he's 85 years old. He's hanging in there, unfortunately, for the Israelis. But he's probably actually got the terminal illness. They say it's prostate cancer. I think the last report I heard, and it sounds like it's pretty far progressed. There's no looking back on that. And honestly, I'm not really sure we could even get cancer special treatment for that, depending on what stage it's in. So it looks like he is on the way out due to that, and the fact that he's looking for a successor does indicate that he is a dead man walking, pretty much. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it's probably not a cover-up that much, in my opinion, either. Usually, people don't want to admit when someone's down with the sickness. I don't think the Iranians have really admitted that a lot yet, but they've kind of hinted at it enough. It's kind of being assumed, unless people are reading in between the lines way too much again, like we were just covering with North Korea and China. So I would assume he probably is actually sick and going to die soon. Like Matthew was also saying, he isn't a strapping young man. I mean, it's not like he's got a long life ahead of him. You know, his years are counting on down at this point, you know, especially with the Israelis hunting him down. You know, even if he wasn't that old, the years are starting to pass right by, or disappearing for the most part. So I would have to say, yeah, he's probably going to die soon. It's not like he's, you know, at the prime of his time. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would know. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got yet another question about the Middle East, and this one goes to Christian Cruz. He said, do you see Israel turning its attention to Russia after they finished cleaning house in the Middle East? And like the Israeli MP said to the Russian TV after the October 7th attack.
I don't think they will. The Israelis have never really had a lot of attention on the Russians, and I would doubt that greatly. If they did anything, it would just be against the Russians in Syria, and then they would just be opening themselves up to just endlessly having unlimited soup and salad in the form of Russian missile attacks till the end of time. And what would be the point of that, really? At least in the Israeli mind, that's what they would be thinking. So I don't think they would move on to Russia. Israel is just looking to defend itself from the Iranians and their proxies, and if they can achieve that, it's going to be back to status quo and just largely trading with everyone around them, making good money, and that's about it. And so with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question here is going to go to Anonymous, who says, if Israel is at war with Iran, then why does Iran cry foul about Israel's warplanes violating their airspace when Israel conducted a major response against Israel?
It's kind of like the rules for thee, not for me sort of a thing that goes on in diplomacy. Because generally the rule, this is something that people always misunderstand, that I see in the mainstream at least. Everyone acts like diplomacy is supposed to be fair. Like if we add a new country to NATO, then obviously Russia has a right to invade Ukraine and turn it into a Russian puppet state. That just makes sense because it's fair. And what people don't know is that diplomacy is never supposed to be fair. Well, me specifically answering that question, I am an American, and so my perspective in the world is that America should benefit and America should prosper at the disadvantage of others most of the time. Like, that's how it always works in diplomacy. Unless if it's our allies, then it's a mutual cooperation for both to prosper, and that's why it's good to have allies, because not only do they prosper, you also prosper at a little bit of a greater level than you would have anyways. But nevertheless, if you are an American, in the diplomatic sense, your objective should be for America to prosper, our allies to prosper, so that way they have a reason to be allies, and then to put down our enemies and put them at an inherent disadvantage anywhere and everywhere that we can. And that usually means that we have to be completely unfair in what we say is just on our end and what's not just on the Russians' end, or the Chinese end for that matter. Like, say, for example, we invade Iran. If we invade Iran, that invasion is totally justified. We are going in there to overthrow a country, a country's government that is not within our interests. It is inherently anti-American, destabilizing our hold on the Middle East at the moment that a lot of countries do enjoy having. And for that reason, we got to go in there and get them out. On the Russian end, however, while they are invading Ukraine right now, the Russians would say that is so wrong. No one should violate the sovereignty of a country like that. America is a warmongering imperialist intent on just, going through and just wiping the Iranian people out. That's how diplomacy works. It's inherently an unfair thing. Everyone's always going to justify their actions, whether they make sense or not, or whether they're right or wrong, and then they will always condemn their rivals' actions, even if they're good. That's just how it works. And so when we talk about a situation with, say, for example, Iran's airspace being violated, it's 100% justified for Iran to violate Israel's airspace and sovereignty by launching attacks on them through their proxies and firing missiles into their territory, because according to Iran, Israel doesn't have the right to exist. But then the Israelis pretty much have the same aspect on the Iranians. But if the Iranians are getting attacked and they're getting, pretty much hurt by this and it's at their disadvantage, the Iranians are going to say, this is totally wrong. How can Israel do this? They shouldn't be allowed to do this. Everyone ought to come around in the world and condemn these people for this, because diplomacy is always just an unfair venture. It generally has to be, especially when you're dealing with countries that are your adversaries or rivals of some sort. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least with how it usually works. And a lot of people are like, that's not fair, and it's not. Like, it's not, and it's not supposed to be. Like, never go into the diplomatic world thinking something is supposed to be fair. It just never is. Like, nothing is ever fair. Like, we put nukes in Turkey, by the way, just to let y'all know how the Cuban Missile Crisis started. We put nuclear weapons in Turkey. And so the Soviet Union went, we need to counter that because they have a massive advantage on us at this point. So we're going to put nukes in Cuba. And then we went, whoa, Nelly, you can't put that nuclear weapon this close to America. That's freaking escalatory and dangerous. But we had literally just done that in Turkey, which is what led up to the Soviets trying to deploy nuclear weapons into Cuba. And also, there was a whole other thing that went on in the background with a whole explosion of a rocket that ended up killing a whole bunch of people on the pad. It was like, I forgot what the disaster was called, but they were about to try and test launch a new rocket in the Soviet space program in the very early 60s. And someone did something wrong, and the rocket blew up, and it killed hundreds of people who were in the space program, which the space program and the Soviet Army's rocketry program was pretty much tied into one thing. So when all those people died, the entire rocketry department of the Soviet Army also died with them. And so then the Soviets were like, dang, American nuclear weapons are in Turkey, and we do not have the ability to produce an intercontinental ballistic missile that is rapidly fireable that could counter that going on. So now we're going to send our nukes to Cuba. That, to getting a little bit more complicated with the explanation, was the real reason all put together. But a part of that was that we also put nuclear weapons in Turkey. That was kind of a bigger part of that. But still, it was right when we did it to the Soviets because they're threatening us, but it's wrong when the Soviets do it back to us because that is escalatory and dangerous. So I hope that you're seeing what I'm saying here, and I know it doesn't sound like it makes sense, but that's because diplomacy is always supposed to be unfair, so it will always sound like you're being very one-sided, and that's just kind of how it always works. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And also here, moving on to our next one, this one is going to go to Cole, who says, would you see Russia using nuclear weapons as a response to a hypothetical NATO intervention due to North Korean involvement? And Cole, I would say on that question right there, that is actually the only situation I could really see Russia using nuclear weapons as a response to it, because like many people have said, that might be the actual red line that Russia has for maybe pulling nukes out. But even at that, though, pulling nukes out is serious, even for Putin, who's a nutcase and also a madman and also a dictator and a whole bunch of other bad things. That is still a humongous step to take to pull out nuclear weapons. But if there was a situation that might cause him to do it, it would probably be NATO intervention inside of Ukraine, even though it probably warranted by NATO. It would also be probably a equal response from Putin to start pulling out nukes, at least in my opinion. It's not justified. I'm saying that, let me make that clear, but he probably would use that as a justification. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that is largely true as well. I'd have to agree. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, let's see here. Enforcer, did you get rid of that person that went berserk in the chat a second ago?
No, I didn't. I was actually going to see how that was going to be dealt with, and there they go. But anyways, with that, also, man, that was dumb because I was like, how long has that person been here? For a while now?
He's been here a while. I don't even know what caused him to go into a berserk session like that. He cussed us out foully for no reason. I don't even know why.
Well, let me one second. I actually need to find out why, but that's not tolerated. It doesn't matter what the reason was or why. Let's see. Hang on. Let's see. For 3. Let's see. Hang on. I've got to go all the way back to the origin here and see this, because I'm not even understanding where in the world that began.
Here, I can give you a recap real quick. I'll scroll back up to go ahead and see what was said. So First of all, I'll read this off to everybody since we're having to go back and look now. Everybody gets to get like in on the scoop here. He said something at first about how is it that you say people donating $1 for 3,000 people or one person giving 3,000, but you're not telling the truth. As you have said many times before, everybody helps keep this. Really didn't make sense. But I responded back and said, huh? What does that mean? So then he said something else here. Let me go scroll down here and read off the next one. Okay, I elaborated some more. I said, we have explained that we can't call off every donation or it would take 30 plus minutes and most people would leave. And also, I don't ban people unfairly. Let's see what he said after that. I think that's when he actually went berserk after that. Let's go down and scroll down to the next one. Yeah, that's when he went berserk.
Yeah, so he cussed us out. He called us, he called us homosexual, and then he called us numbnuts. And the entire time
seems like an unstable fella.
Yeah, cussing like a sailor the entire time at that point. I think he ought to get this because he's been around long enough, but this isn't a super chat night where we're making, a living doing this. We're here for free running a fundraiser, and there's so many people who donate to the fundraisers that we can't call off everyone. Like, we've made that clear for like 3 years now. Like, every single Sunday, we're like, we can't call off everyone because there are hundreds of donors. And if we did that, it would take like 30 straight minutes. So we can only call off top donors who've thrown in over 50. And then with super chats, we literally call off every single one, whether it's $500 or just $1, we call all of them off. And thank everyone for their support. I gotta say, that one was fairly interesting. That is pretty freaking rude right there to have been on this channel for that long and then just go off the handle on something that they've known for like a year and a half is how the channel works. That's a little interesting. That's new. I've never seen anyone actually just go off the handle like that on something that's literally been explained and has been as clear as crystal for like 3 years now. I've never seen that.
Dave will come back. Dave will come back. And you can blame it on Hot Dog Man.
It's like, I don't even get it. And then he says, let's see. He said, what else did he say? You ban people wrongly? It's like, no, we ban people like you who cuss us out. It's like, those are like the only people we ban, or like anti-Westerners. Those are the only two groups of people we ban, or those two groups. It's like,
honestly, I gotta say, Enforcer, like, honestly, at this point, like, I've got a thick skin. Like, it doesn't bother me, like, as bad as people would probably think.
It doesn't bother me, but the stupidity of this kind of stuff just blows me away sometimes.
I mean, I was about to say, though, we still are people on the other end. I think people forget that sometimes. We do have, like, feelings over here. We're not, like, sensitive babies or anything like that. But at the same time, it's like, dude, you've been around here for ages. Why just, like, suddenly go off and cuss us out and call us all kinds of horrific names like that? Because I didn't even get rude with the guy. I was being nice and explaining it to him, perfectly fine. I don't understand that, man. But, it's just the way it goes.
Yeah, I don't, look, I'll be honest, it doesn't, whenever I get a little heated sounding responding to this stuff, I start getting, high-pitched and a lot faster talking, it's not because I'm, oh my god, how could they say this? I'm shattered. I'm like, how the hell do you not know this? Especially this guy, it's he's been around, I would say, at least a year. So he's been through at least 50 or so fundraisers because, there's 52 weeks in a year and we run a fundraiser every single Sunday. So we've run at least 50 of them with him being around. And he knows how it works. We even go through the explanations every night. When it's every other day but now, we call off every single super chat because this is how we make a living, and every single person, whether the amount be big or small, really help out a lot. And there's also not a lot of people who super chat. There's maybe 30 to 50 every night, so we can call off every single person, whether it is $1 or $500. And then when it comes to fundraisers nights, there are hundreds of people who are throwing in donations, way more than we ever get super chats. And so we can't call everyone off, and so then we limit it to $50 and up. That has been clear for 3 years now, and I know that's been clear ever since that person has been on this channel. And it's like, how in the hell can you just go off out of the blue? And that's always how it goes, everyone. That's always how it's went every single time. We treat everyone as nicely as we can. And if you ever see any detractors or haters against the channel, I'm sure that guy will be a permanent hater for no reason now. They'll sit there and say, I was a fan of the Enforcer until this. They were a fan of the Enforcer until they literally just snapped mentally and then just went off on us one night and cussed us out like sailors, and we banned them because we don't expect them to take that kind of crap from us, and we don't expect to take crap like that from him. And then from the rest of his life now, he'll be saying, oh, the Enforcers are terrible people. It's whatever. It's I don't care what the guy has to say. But it always just baffles me when someone like him's actually been around for a while and then just goes off out of the blue. Like, we didn't even do anything to the guy. We were doing what we've been doing for 3 years now. It's clear exactly what we do. Weird. Whack.
Do you think that maybe he was secretly a Russian and maybe he was like missing out on his vodka or something like that? Like, when they blew up the vodka factory, that's maybe what sent him off the cliff, maybe.
Yeah. I don't know. Let's see. Someone said he's drunk. Look, I don't excuse foul behavior even if someone is drunk. That was way across the line right there. He gets banned for that. There's just no question about that. Like, if you want, like, especially with how vile he was getting, like, we don't get vile on anyone except for the hot dog man. Like, quite literally, we don't. And even with that, we try and like limit that a good deal. And so it's like, how the hell can someone just go off like that? There's no excuse to that. Like, if he was drunk, shouldn't have been watching the channel that drunk that he's just, well, he wasn't that drunk. I will say that in the counters to that, because he was able to type up like multiple paragraphs that were fairly coherent on nonsense, and then go off on it. So he wasn't that drunk because he was able to type. Well,
the good news out of it is, it's a savior of a day for Hot Dog Man because he gets to offset his massive losses and hemorrhaging of subscribers with one more. So he can try to like stem the flow here with one more guy before he turns on him too.
And we always know where folks like that go. Every single one of them goes to like the Island of Misfit Toys, which is the Hot Dog Man's channel, and from then on you'll see that guy in their comment section over there going, "I was a fan of the Enforcer until one day I saw the light." And it's like, you didn't even see shit, man. It's like you just came up with something out of the blue that doesn't make sense, and then you got banned because you cussed us out like sailors. It's like, that's what happened. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. Didn't mean to get the entire chat involved in like drama. I'm about to turn into that guy XQC. I'm gonna be like, whoa, chat, look at this chat. That's crazy, chat. Whoa, chat. Like, is this an L chat, like, or something like that? I'm about to start doing that. But still, that was insane.
Somebody was saying it's a great day for Hot Dog Man. Man, Hot Dog Man's over there right now, just like rubbing his hands together. Talking about, oh man, I can finally recover. I got one more sub. Oh my god, it's a beautiful day in the Hot Dog Man community. Like, seriously though, he'll probably be over there gloating about getting one subscriber or something like that. And also, like, here's the thing, folks. Like, everybody that's gotten ever banned out of the live chat for like being foul like that, like the Enforcer said, they go over to Hot Dog Man's place. So imagine when you get all these very hostile and vile people together that are like ready to go off with the drop of a hat, like with a little spark. Imagine a room full of those people, and you have Hot Dog Man's community, and those people are so violent. Like, if Hot Dog Man says one thing, and he knows this, that's why he's very careful what he says and like backs off of stuff, and he gets scared of his own audience. If he says something they don't want to hear, they go berserk. They will turn on him in like 2 seconds. That's why if you go over there and tell him to say something that he knows is going to set the audience off, he will ignore it, ban you, and all kinds of stuff like that, like trying to avoid that little spark in the room.
Oh man, but that kind of stuff, like, like, I'll just be honest, like, it doesn't bother us at this point. I mean, like, literally we've dealt with far worse at this point. So it doesn't like bother me on an emotional level where I'm like, shatter, oh my god, someone cussed me out or something like that. But it always just blows my mind. Like, I have to say this one on air this time and actually talk that one out, because it's so stupid to see stuff like that happen, and then you're going to hear some victim story. And dude, you know how Hot Dog Man's gonna do. He's gonna be like, y'all, you wouldn't believe it, we have a defector from the Enforcer camp. It's like, he cussed us out like a sailor for nothing. It's like, that's not a defector that got banned. That guy got banned. It's like, that's how it was. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that well. And also, so it's pretty freaky to be in a room with so many delusional, unstable people. Yeah, I mean, like, Hot Dog Man's place is like Matthew was saying, it's like an insane asylum over there or something like that, because like the people over there are highly unstable and they're all ready to just start cussing that guy out, and then everyone else in the chat at the flip of a dime, like literally just like the breeze could pass by and the whole thing devolves into chaos and everyone cussing each other out. That happens a lot over there. But anyways, with that, take away from this before we move on into the rest of our questions is, once again, let us go over the rule. This is the golden rule for how we interact with all of y'all and how y'all interact with us. We do not allow rude people in here. The people who cuss each other out, whether that is person to person in a live chat or towards us, and we don't cuss any of y'all out. That's always the rule. Everyone treats each other nice and politely in here. Y'all can disagree, but there's no snark jabs if you disagree. Like, it's not like, well, maybe if you were smarter, like, that's not tolerated either. Like, you'd be like, well, maybe I think differently on that or something. That's how we always run this channel. That's how it will always run. I'm not going to be having this chat or the channel devolve into this, like, crazy insano land that most other places on YouTube are, where people just cuss each other out all day long and it's a place of violence and anger. That will not be this channel. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. I hope that once again reiterates the rules, at least with how this is run for years now. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next question here. This one is going to go to, let's see here, Bot Master Karma, who's not a bot, by the way, but has a very good question. And it says, what are your predictions for the way the Russia-Ukraine war ends, and in regards to current and future borders after Ukraine wins? And for my prediction, I would say that it'll probably end when Putin is taken out of power. While he remains in office, he is not going to end this war. I think he's made that pretty clear now. And no matter who you hear out there saying this war is going to end in a day with the right negotiations taking place, I think that is underestimating the extent and the depth of the conflict. This thing is going to keep going for years, no matter who's negotiating. And I think that people will start to realize that over time. Putin has some type of like deep down like personal motivation for this war, probably for personal reasons. And Zelensky has gotten very deep himself in fighting for the land and not giving it up. So neither side's really going to negotiate. And Zelensky really should not give up the land. Like, that is his land. That is the Ukrainian people's land, and they should not give it up. But Putin, at the same time, while he's still living and still in that office, he's not going to let his ego give in the way and lit up that land either. He's going to try to take some of it at least, and there's just no like ground to give there. Like, it's just going to keep going. So that's my prediction. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say the war is probably going to end when the Russians go into complete economic collapse. It's getting to that point eventually. We don't know when it will actually kind of like tip over completely, but when that tips over, Putin will probably be put out of power pretty quickly after that, and the war will probably come to an end. So I would largely agree with Matt. I still think it would be preceded, though, before Putin gets thrown out, by a complete economic collapse of some sort that would throw the country into tumult, and then they would, at that point, not really be able to continue the war due to financial reasons. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
Oh, and also, by the way, on Botmaster Karma's right there, he also said, in regards to current and future borders, what do you think they'll look like after Ukraine wins?
Oh, I think as far as future borders, I think the Russian Federation will look identical to what it is now, and Ukraine will probably get back their 1991 borders. So Ukraine will look like what it does on Google Maps. It will look correct to these borders and not the ones that account for the occupied territories that the Russians currently have. And so I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and this one is going to go to, let's see here. This one's going to go to Roger H., who says, has the U.S.'s refusal to let Ukraine use long-range weapons in Russia, has it encouraged the increased threats of attacks by Iran, North Korea, and China?
I don't think so, because I believe that the increased attacks or increased hostile tensions in multiple different areas of the world really are because of the things that are happening there. Like, for example, in the Middle East, with the Iranians striking Israel, they struck Israel back in April before that was even really a concern this year about the long-range weaponry, and everyone saw that the United States was clearly going to say no. That happened beforehand. The October 7th attack on Israel happened beforehand, and then the Israeli counterstrikes, both in April and also just right now in October, have both happened largely on their own. And the Iranians are, of course, responding tit for tat to that. And then in Korea, they are responding tit for tat in fairly petty ways against each other and actions that they're taking to escalate. So I would say that it's not really that the United States said no to Ukraine using long-range weapons in Russia, and then that's what led to a lot of these areas of the world to start getting very dangerous, I guess is a good way to put it. I think it's just more so the perfect storm, because when you look at all of these different events, these different largely these different major events that are going on in different regions of the world, they're all just kind of reaching their head about the same time coincidentally, and it's not really some sort of a major orchestrated sort of a plan or a scheme by the axis of evil. It really just is what kind of happened. But still, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be Knox Date, who says, how long do you guys think it'll take the U.S. and the Western world to be forced to take military action inside of Europe and also LSA, make Russia small again?
And make Russia small. And I would have to say that as far as how long would it take? Let me see if I can get that question right here. How long do you think it would take the U.S.? I don't know. That might not actually ever happen, because the only reason we would think Western military intervention would happen, even on a Polish and French level, which is kind of like the first in, kind of the vanguard of sorts, would be if the Ukrainians were losing badly. And we don't really see at the moment where the Ukrainians would be losing badly at any point where that would become a serious consideration for Western countries. So they might not ever get involved. We may actually see the Ukrainians will end up winning this in a way that they're happy without the West getting involved. But if for some reason the North Koreans actually tip the scale somehow and then the war started going badly in Ukraine's favor, we would probably see the Western countries would get involved at that point. So that would be my general take on that. It really depends on which way the world goes in the future. There's two different ways. Either Ukraine keeps on doing fairly well on its own and the West never gets involved, or the West gets involved because Ukraine starts losing pretty badly. And we don't ever see a moment where Ukraine's going to be losing pretty badly for now, so it looks like it'll actually be the former instead of the latter. So they may never get involved. And so with that, I hope that does address that final question of the night fairly well. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every single one of y'all so much once again for enjoying the stream tonight, because there was a lot of y'all here. At the peak, there was nearly 11,000 people here. It was 10,960 people. And over the course of the stream, 78,000 people have watched it. I thank you all so much once again for watching. And if y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to subscribe. Make sure to like and comment, because it makes us very happy when people do those sorts of things. You know what I mean? But nevertheless, we will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of news from around the world. And we will also probably see y'all tomorrow, Matthew will at least, in the Short Wars summary, if there's one to be made. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, like the Enforcer said, a huge shout out once again for another successful fundraiser stream on a nice Sunday, that is, on October the 27th. And also, by the way, about 80,000 people have tuned in at this point in the stream to watch the coverage. So once again, huge shout out to everyone tonight. And also, huge shout out for getting us up to $3,658 raised, which is well above the $3,000 goal. It's all thanks to the LSA. And once again, we have helped out Ukraine in a very big way through the efforts of Nova Ukraine. But with that, we'll see you all tomorrow on the Short War Summary at midday. Tomorrow is my day for that, so if there is news to cover, you'll be hearing from me tomorrow midday. And also, be sure to join us again on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern to cover the next night of War News streaming. But with that, of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards